7 o'clock. I started the recording.
Margaret, we'll just dive in. It's January 22nd, 2024. This is the GBOS regular meeting. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors, its committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act as found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25 public meetings. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meetings Standards of Conduct. I'll call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. I am Brianna Sullivan, co-chair and fire department supervisor. Also in the room,
Jennifer Wingard, land use supervisor.
Guy Wade, Parks and Rec, Cemetery.
thank you. And online we have Amanda.
Amanda Sassy, Public Safety and Road Supervisor.
Thank you. And Mike. Mike's muted, but he is online. So when you're unmuted, go ahead and.
Right, hopefully this works. I had
Yes.
several mute buttons. Yeah, Mike Edgington, Economic Development and Housing and Economic Development Supervisor.
Okay, thank you. Everyone's here. I'll read the land acknowledgement. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the indigenous peoples of Alaska whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the areas known to be Dena'ina and Aluktik homeland, respects the people who were stewards of this land for generations. We commit to the continued stewardship of this land and are grateful to be part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley for present and future peoples. Any disclosures this evening?
Yeah, I have the same disclosure that I've had before that we've already discussed, I believe.
Okay, I'm
Nothing has
guessing
changed.
that's the STR one?
Yes.
Okay, we have voted on that and you are fine to discuss and vote on that item that is on our agenda, as far as I believe. And agenda revisions or approval. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, second and third. Any objections? Margaret?
Not
Well, not
object, but I wanted to point out that if you want to possibly move the HLB 1 and 5 year plans, then you could take action on it. Or if you leave it in new business, then less so.
Right. So a potential amendment could be to move number 11 to old business for time sensitive reasons.
I will so move.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, any discussion on this?
Did we, during that meeting with the beauty, did we speak about or the special meeting too? Being on it?
We did, and so I almost didn't make this. I wasn't sure whether or not to make this movement to approve, but that does count on us being able to fit that in time. And one thing about this, the particular thing that they asked us to talk about is we have already talked about it. I don't know if we're ready to make a decision about it, but this has already been on new business and old business before. And so I think that there's an argument to be made, given the time, and given that we're not sure we can meet before the February 9th, just in case.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Thank you, Margaret. Any objections to that amendment? Go by assent then, and the agenda is amended to have number 11 be under old business. And we have several lists of meeting minutes to approve. Would anyone like to approve?
To approve the January 22nd.
Well, that one was at 4. Margaret has it here in case.
No, how about the December 28th and December 18th?
Okay. December 28th and 18th. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? Okay, we'll go by assent. Both those meeting minutes are approved. Margaret, do you have anything to add with your hand up a second ago?
No.
Okay,
Quick.
right. So we'll approve those next time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Announcements. The public is encouraged to ask questions and provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. To help discussion stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public and keep your comments focused on business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. GBOS seats A and B terms end in 2024 and will be on the April GVSA ballot. Filing at the municipal clerk's office is between January 12th and January 26th, 2024. More information is available at this hyperlink. The Foraker Group Board Training is scheduled for Tuesday, February 27th after 5 p.m. in the Girdwood Community Room. All are welcome to attend. GBUS LUC Joint Meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 7th at 7 p.m. in the Girdwood Community Room. We'll go on to introductions, presentations, and reports. So first we have legislative reports. Is Kathy Giesel online today or one of her staff? And I can't see everything on the screen if there is anyone, just if she's down there farther. Pages just being admitted. Paige, if you can hear us, I just offered if Kathy Giesel's online or if you have anything to report on her behalf. Or we could come back to, I don't hear anything.
She said she would be online later tonight, so.
Okay. Margaret or Kyle, if that comes up, please let me know. And the mayor's office, do we have anyone here tonight from the mayor's office? Okay, I don't hear any, so we'll go to our assembly members. I see Zach Johnson. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, hey, good evening. I'll keep it quick, but always happy to answer questions either here or with anyone later offline. Few updates. Right now is the application period for the mayor's community grant and arts grants. Those are $400,000 and $100,000 respectively, and the applications are due January 26th. You can find, I think, a link for the application online, or if anyone has any problems, certainly reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction. Assembly business is we're taking up the updated design and plan of finance for the Don Young Port of Alaska modernization project for Terminal 1. The revised cost estimate we got for T1 was $661 million. That's a 65% design estimate, so it may fluctuate a little bit. And what you're going to see here introduced, I believe, at the next meeting, but it'll be for action at the end of February, will be a authorization for a $400 million revenue bond, which we're just talking about that because it's kind of a scary number. We have to have a funding mechanism before we can put it the RFP out to contract for the work. The hope and expectation is that we will not actually have to bond for 400 million or even close to that. You know, we hope to be able to get more funding through federal and state sources. We have the opportunity to apply for the TIFIA loan. So the amount that's paid by the port users through tariffs should be, you know, hopefully substantially less than that. But just previewing that, and again, people can reach out if they have questions about it. For the assembly meeting tomorrow night, it is the last meeting for things that are going to be going onto the ballot for the April election. One of those notably is the cemetery bond. This is a follow-up to an ordinance the Assembly passed last summer that established cemeteries as an area-wide service. And what the bond package would include would be some funding for improvements to the Anchorage Cemetery. It would also, I think most notably, include funding for the development of cemeteries in Eagle River and in Girdwood. I know it's a project the community's been involved in for many years now. And in terms of the scope of the work, the site, the studies, a lot of it's already been done. I think it's just been about coming up with a way to pay for it. So we are hoping that if the Assembly approves it, there'll be that bond on the ballot. There is the original version for $8.3 million that would fully fund the cemeteries. There's also an S version for 4.1, which wouldn't cover the full cost, but would at least get the project started and also give us time to try and find some other funding mechanisms. Also on the agenda for tomorrow night is a AO that would provide some regulations for short-term rentals. One of the co-sponsors on that is fellow South Anchorage Assembly member Randy Salt. He's been working on that for a while with Nick Zalatel. It's gone through a few iterations, but the version that we anticipate coming up tomorrow night is essentially would require licensing and registration with some fees and some conditions for short-term rentals. And the Assembly's also already indicated some that there's consideration of additional steps or measures, restrictions that could be taken as a follow-up from this AO. And then also of note for Girdwood, Holton Hills. It was tabled indefinitely back in early April of last year. And the sponsor, the main sponsor, Meg Zalatel, has brought it back. So that is on the agenda for continued public testimony tomorrow night and possible action. I'll tell you, I know that I anticipate there will be some floor amendments offered. I think there's also a likelihood that there will be support for postponing action on that item to allow for some work sessions and more opportunities to dialogue about what the project means for the new members who aren't as familiar with it, and then also further opportunity for revisions and amendments to it. So I'll pause there if anyone has any questions.
Okay, I'll start with Jennifer and then Guy.
Thank you so much for that report. Do you have any recommendations for tomorrow night? There's a lot of people wondering, like, do they show up? When do they show up? Like, do you have any, I know this is all a little bit like crystal ball, but do you have any, what's your best guess?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think there is a good chance, although no guarantees, everything is going to go up to a vote, but that there'll be a postponement of action on it. So I'm not sure that last night or tomorrow night will be the last opportunity for people to testify. That being said, can't necessarily mandate that. The challenge with tomorrow night, unfortunately, is we have a number of must-pass items, including everything that's going on to the ballot, as well as some appropriations that just have to happen tomorrow, which means this item is, pretty far down on the agenda. I think if we didn't have the must-pass stuff, I'd probably make a motion to move it higher up in the agenda to try and give people an opportunity to speak up on it without having to stick around to 10 or 11 p.m. at night. But I don't think that's going to be feasible just with the things that have to happen tomorrow. So the chair of the assembly has already suggested there could be a meeting continuing on Wednesday, basically day after tomorrow, to take up items that were not covered Tuesday night. So that's a long way of saying I'm hopeful that tomorrow night will not be the last chance for people who want to testify on it, but I can't guarantee that. But you'll probably, to be honest, have to stick around pretty late to have that chance tomorrow night, because I don't think we're going to get to it until 10 or 11 if we get to it at all. And I'm sorry for that, but it's just kind of the way the stars have aligned.
Ask one follow-up question. Could I just ask you real quickly, can you say what's the earliest you think it would possibly be addressed? Like, do people need, I assume people do not need to be there at 6 o'clock.
No, certainly not. I would guess that probably the earliest would be, I mean, I my best guess is there's no way we would take this up before 10 or 10:30. But I hate to say that and then have some, weird twist of fate where it comes up earlier. But honestly, if it was me and my time, I'd probably feel pretty confident that there's nothing going to happen on it before 10:30 if it happens at all on Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. Guy?
Zach, this guy Wade, there's a question about the cemetery bond, and I appreciate you working with Tommy and getting that up, and that's exciting. I was just kind of, I know it made some of the supporters a little nervous with the reduction in the funding amount. And was that, what was behind that? Just what you thought would only pass, or are you seeing some other, was there talk of other funding sources? What kind of drove that cut in half?
Yeah, so the S version is coming from, I believe it's members Zalatel and Voland. They put it out there. And it more or less aligns with a lot of the Assembly's conversation around other bond measures, is that the Assembly has generally signaled that they are supportive of bonds between about $4 and $5 million. So there were several bonds, including the Chugach Access Service Area, which I co-sponsored, as well as the toilet bond that initially came in with higher amounts, same with cemeteries. And then all those got revised down to be somewhere between $4 and $5 million. So I think just kind of, assuming that the same logic that was applied to those bonds is also applied to this one, I expect that the majority of the Assembly is going to feel more comfortable with that smaller number. Now, obviously, we don't want to start the project and end up with it half done. So, we discussed this in work session. I said, we have to understand that this carries with it, if we go with the S version, an implied mandate to come up with the rest of the funding. Now, there are, potentially other options that could come along outside of a bond. The bond gives us an authorization to spend up to that amount, which, I think we can anticipate getting the work started with that. But there's still the possibility for some funding from the state. There are some federal programs, as I understand, that we become eligible for once the project progresses to a certain point. Member Cross has spoken on that. And then there's always the possibility that we come back with, a second bond next year, somewhere down the road to finish it. So, yeah, I think the Assembly's given some strong signals that they are disinclined to support an $8 million bond at this point. But, it'll be up to debate. We have the original version and the S version. My sense of it is just, I think the S version is more probable and might be more palatable to voters too. There's going to be a lot of bonds on the ballot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a good chunk of seed money, I guess, if we need to go with that and build up of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Guy, and thank you, Zach, for those answers on the cemetery. That is very helpful on the bond. Mike has his hand up.
Yeah, at the work session, there was also this, I think, last minute wrench thrown into the question about whether there needs to be another vote, separate vote within Girdwood. Are you pretty sure that's not going to be needed now, or could that be something that pops up at the last minute?
To be honest, I have not received the definitive answer to that question. I'll try and interrogate it tomorrow morning, but I can't tell you with certainty. It was not.
Okay.
To be honest, we got pretty far along in crafting this
Exactly.
bond.
It seems rather late. So. Yeah. We'll be ready in case then. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board or any from the public?
I have a question.
Okay, we have one in the room. You're probably not good enough, but just closer to the mic is great.
Hi, Zach. I'm curious if you know the whys and hows of why Holton Hills is back on the table.
It was a motion that was made by member Zalatel, who was one of the original sponsors of the Holton Hills project. She had said, I think, not long after it was voted to be postponed indefinitely, that it was coming back. Or no, maybe it was later in the summer. She did say at one point it was coming back. Now, we didn't have any indications that it was imminent. When it was added to the agenda as a late on the table item in December, myself and member Solt were, I think, as surprised as you were to see it there. I didn't have any notion that was happening until 5 minutes before the meeting. So I can't speak exactly to, the motivations or the timing. Now, I do know that, member Zalatel and I think some others on the Assembly are interested in finding a path forward for the project. But they have also, stated that, at least member Zalatel stated her willingness to consider holding work sessions and consider possible amendments to the project. So I think that suggests that we'll have more of an opportunity to dive into the whys, but frankly, due to the Open Meetings Act, I'm not in a position to go ask her personally what inspired her to do this. You certainly can, though.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that there might be some work sessions before it gets voted on.
Could you say your name for the record, please?
Yes, I'm Betsy Cannell. And my follow-up question is, there was supposed to be a contractor hired for or in HLB to essentially be in charge of this project. What's the status of that?
So I can pull up the email if you want to know the exact words, but I asked that question of the real estate director the other day, and essentially the answer was to the effect of that person hasn't been hired yet, but it is in progress, and they anticipate, I think, filling the position or filling the contract here soon, but I was not given an exact date.
Well, it's a contractor. I guess it's not on the list of job openings in MOA because I looked.
Okay,
right, correct.
you.
There'd be an RFP out there somewhere.
Thank you, Zach. We have one more question. Go ahead, Mike.
It's not a question, just a clarification. Actually, the RFP is not out yet, and it has to be out for at least 2 weeks. So I think the hope is that the RFP will be out later this month, and then they'll have to make a decision on the RFP within about 2 weeks or so after that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I can just trying to see if I can quickly find the comments I got from the real estate director, but
yeah, I think this was from the 4 o'clock meeting this afternoon, so that should be pretty.
Okay, well, there you go then.
Yeah.
That's more recent information than I have.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks again, Zach, for being here and all of your service and tomorrow's meeting as well.
Thanks. I'll be sticking
yeah.
around.
Okay, thank you. And then I also saw Kathy Giesel come online, so we can go back to a legislative report. Kathy, if you're available.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I apologize for being late. I was trying to sign in to your earlier meeting today and realized my error. We are moving pretty promptly this legislature. We started last Tuesday, and on Thursday we had a joint session to consider override of the governor's veto for education funding. Your attendees at the meeting today and board members probably saw that override vote failed. The House Rules Committee did something exceedingly unusual, and that was convened a meeting on a Senate Bill 140. Senate Bill 140 would accept federal money for broadband in Alaska. So it would supply broadband for schools as well as general. And so they took that bill and began to put education bills into it. We call it, well, there's a term for it here in the legislature called a turducken. It's where you take a bill and you put a bunch of other bills into it. Anyway, they on Saturday had a very lengthy meeting, apparently 5 hours with multiple public testimony. They are proposing BSA appropriation of $300 per student. The legislature had proposed, the Senate had proposed $680. So this is significantly lower. In fact, it's lower than the amount that the governor had even vetoed. He had cut it in half, and it's lower than even was appropriated for this current fiscal year. In addition, they put charter schools into it. The determination by the state Board of Education in terms of where charter schools would be, teacher salary bonuses, just multiple education issues. The Senate is in negotiation with the House, asking them to withdraw that bill, clean it up, in other words, and make it simply, if they want to put education funding in it, the $680 amount is what the Senate would agree to. There is another, if they don't agree to do that, the broadband bill that was Senate Bill 140 that they put all these other things into is pretty important for the state because it brings significant federal funding to the broadband issue. There is a companion bill in the House. Representative Bryce Edgman has it. And so he actually could move that bill through the House pretty expeditiously, get it over to the Senate. The deadline for that federal money for broadband alone is the end of February. So we really would like to have that broadband money. And so we're going to be hoping the House will get us a clean bill on that. The other kind of big thing that's happening is tomorrow in Senate Finance, the defined benefit bill will be heard again. So this is a bill that would take Alaska into a hybrid defined benefit pension system. We had a defined benefit system up until 2006 for all public employees. Due to an actuarial error and healthcare costs increasing, the funding for that defined benefit fell significantly. The legislature decided to go to a 401k type of retirement system. We have seen a significant loss of employees. I think we all feel it in snow removal, but also in teachers, public defenders, public advocates, SNAP, food stamp distribution, multiple public services that government provides. State troopers, there's 70 openings in the state trooper division. And so we believe in the Senate majority bipartisan coalition that returning to a defined benefit would make a significant difference in recruitment and retention of our public employees, not just state public employees, but municipal, local community. So that hearing tomorrow afternoon in Senate Finance is a pretty big deal. So those are kind of the big things. Those are the two top priorities of the Senate bipartisan coalition majority, that being education funding and returning to a defined benefit. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll stop and happy to take questions.
Thank you so much for your thorough report and the important topics right now. Are there any questions from the board for Senator Giesel? Okay, don't see any, and I don't see any hands. Any in the room? We have one in the room. Come just a little forward for the mic, please.
Towards the mic. Hi, my name is Linda Mankoff, and I'm with the Girdwood Health Clinic. And so I wanted to ask you, does this broadband, does that apply to the streamlined application of the SNAP process for food stamps?
It would probably, it could actually, Linda, as I think about it, because of course in rural Alaska, they would have a whole lot more access to online applications. And that's what the state is going to for those SNAP applications. A lot of that now is online, almost all of it, frankly. So you're right, it would have a ripple effect to SNAP distribution. Good question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. And thank you for being here again, Senator Giesel, and all of your work. We'll go along to, I didn't see any other assembly members tonight, I don't think. Oh, yeah, Randy said he wouldn't be able to come, at least in person. And then we have our school board is in the packet for the update with a lot of links. So we'll go to supervisor reports. Anyone want to go first? Guy, would you like to go?
I think I spoke a little about cemetery.
Oh, cemetery,
Yeah.
good. Okay. Nothing to report. Jennifer?
You know what, I would report just for, this is not actually directly connected to land use, but that I would like to say that anyone who is interested in submitting emailing your assembly members for any reason, whatever might be on your mind, just in case you have anything on your mind right now that you think you might want to do that, that I just learned I just was reminded again today that if you don't use it's better not to use the button for emailing all of them, that tends to go into kind of a trash file, or more precisely into a giant heap that's hard to pick things out of. So if you're interested in testifying the entire assembly, it's better if you type in the individual addresses and send them individually.
Okay, thanks for the announcement. Anything else?
And then specifically, no, I don't think so.
Okay. I'll go next. I have a few things for my report. One was the Glacier Creek erosion, which I think we did receive an email about, but Sean Holland from DOT just after our December meeting emailed an update saying that they made progress by requesting funding, which is a 4 to 6 week process in which the design would be finalized. And once they get funding, it would take another 6 weeks to get a contractor on board. And they were on track to get adequate erosion control before spring breakup. And then the January 10th update was that they received funding and were advertising the contract for erosion repair project with bids due January 17th. And from there, it would take 4 to 6 weeks, generally between bid opening and work starting. So today, Sean Holland's update from DOT said the Alaska Marine Excavation LLC was the low bidder, so they are awarded the project. And the project won't be long duration, probably less than 1 month, but it will be impactful to the pedestrian path and highway. And he has not seen a schedule yet, but anticipates the first couple weeks of February. So if we have any questions, we can submit them to him or Margaret or Kyle. They can pass it to Sean Holland. Also, he was saying that the Seward Highway Phase 3 was bid on in December, and that scope is federally funded project with construction on pathway and parking lots between mileposts 84 of the Seward Highway and 20 Mile River. And the project work includes grading, drainage, paving, signage, and striping. And Granite Construction was awarded the contract. They don't anticipate any work until May. And the cemetery, we've already discussed. They had a work session and then the S version that Zach Johnson just spoke about. I attended the Girdwood Board of Fire January 16th annual meeting. They awarded 5-year and 10-year and 15-year service awards and talked about the chief presented changes that have occurred over several of the last years and goals for 2024. Also on that same topic, the property tax exemption that we passed a resolution for back in September. The Chugiak Fire Service Area Board of Supervisors passed a resolution in favor of the property tax exemption, but unfortunately, because the bond demand is so thick right now, I'd say it was just coming in too last minute to get it through to the assembly. So hopefully next April, we'll be able to help support that again. But that is what still no response from Melissa Shaganoff regarding land acknowledgement. The rest is on the agenda. Mike, do you have any updates?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Yeah, I've been working on, as I think, overlapping Brianna to some extent with the ballot question for property tax exemption for volunteer fire departments. There's definitely interest. It's just not going to make it this year. If it makes it onto the ballot for next April, i.e. April 2025, and it passes, it would be retroactive to the beginning of 2025. Other than that, it's been Halton Hills, short-term rentals, cemetery, a few other bits and pieces. One thing I'd like to mention is, as I think a lot of people may be aware, the green cards came out, which have the property tax assessment. So it's basically how much the municipality thinks your property is worth. Overall, Girdwood saw somewhere, I think, typically between about 6 and 10% increase in property values. I think some condos went up by more like 20%. That doesn't necessarily mean your taxes are going up. If everybody's assessment goes up by 10%, then there wouldn't actually be any change to your taxes, because it just means it gets spread over a bigger pool. But we will find out in sort of May, June time when the final numbers come out as to what the actual tax assessments are. But if you have any complaints, if you think the assessments are wrong, there's information on the back about how to appeal. The deadlines are fairly tight for that. So if you're going to do an appeal, do it quickly.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, do you have an update or a report rather?
I don't. There is a report by the police chief in the packet, and we have an agenda item for the rest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So
Yeah.
I had one other thing.
Please, Jennifer.
Just from mentioning, I felt like I should mention to the community from our meeting earlier today with the municipality that their HLB gave us an update on the industrial park timeline, and they're saying that the first step is to finish the work plan, and the final public comments for that are due on February 9th. It's February 22nd when they think they're going to pass that, hopefully, and then assembly approval in March. There'll be a feasibility study, and then they plan to present the results of that at the GBOS and HLB quarterly meeting in April, and then possibly have a joint work session after that to agree on moving forward. So that's the plan for industrial park.
Okay, thank you. Margaret?
Yeah, I wanted to point out, just earlier today, I did receive a report from Tim Sharnan. So I wanted to give you all a chance to take a look at this. I don't think it's anything new, and I just didn't want us to slide past without acknowledging the report from Tim Sharnan, the Girdwood representative at HLBAC.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Yes, like she said, it's in the packet and it's up on the screen now in the room. So then we'll go to any other committee updates that are not addressed in the agenda. Is there anyone with a committee update? Okay, I don't see any hands. And we'll go on then to number 4, which is status of proposed Girdwood developments. That's in the packet. I don't know if there's anything significant. I haven't heard of any changes in anyone I've reached out to Mike, do you have any updates on this?
I've been
It's-
trying to track down who's now responsible for airport leasing and making the decisions there, since there's been a change in personnel, and I haven't had success yet. But hopefully, someone will call me back.
Okay. Thank you. And I've reached out to the NSTAR contact, and there's not an update since the last time I reached out to them. Anyone else have anything to contribute there? Okay, we'll go along to the service provider reports, and Fire Chief Weston is first.
Hi there. So our final count for 2023 was 464 calls. So that's about 38.6, or basically 39 calls a month. And currently we've had 38 calls this month so far. We had a number of CO calls where people were having CO issues sounding in their houses. We also notably had 2 structure fires this month so far. One was on Tanner Circle, which we were able to contain in a new construction to the garage area. And then the second was at the laundromat, which was a dryer fire, which we were able to contain as well. And so happy about those 2 responses. And we've had 1 pulse point activation so far this month for CPR needed in the community. And that's it for me, if there's any questions.
Oh, thank you. Any questions for Chief Weston? Okay, thank you. Go to Police. Chief O'Shea's report is in the packet, but is he on the call?
No, I understand he is not available.
Okay. Okay, so we can read that before or after the meeting as well. So thank you, Chief O'Shea. Roads, Parks and Rec, Kyle, when he arrives, or?
No, I think we can run through it. When you get Kyle, you get different stories. So the thing I want to tell you about primarily, well, first of all, the Glacier Creek Bridge information that you were already discussing. Unfortunately, the emergency repair project funds don't allow us to spend money on things other than the emergency repair, but we are still working on an avenue to create a connection underneath the bridge on that side and out, as is indicated in the new Girdwood Trails plan. So we'll get there. We'll keep working on it. Watch out for moose. They're everywhere and they're angry. Watch out for plows. They're everywhere. They're not angry, but you don't want to find them unexpectedly. The Trails Committee wants to remind everyone, no post holes. If it warms up again, everything will get really soft, and we don't want to wreck the trails that we have. They're in great shape right now. So much thanks to all of the volunteers that are out there all the time. Also collecting poop. We have so many dog poop bags in the garage. We're so excited to get them out there in the community. So please use them all the time. It's so great when we open up the trash cans and they're super heavy and full with stuff that we want them to be super heavy and full with. We're still waiting for the Girdwood Trails plan to make it into introduction to the assembly. As you've heard already, the meeting tomorrow is really packed, and so it looks unlikely that will be introduced. But once it is, then we will just need 2 weeks, and then they can review it more fully and hopefully accept it. Not very much exciting to tell you about the parks and amenities, although we are planning the Showdown Throwdown March 9th and 10th. So come on out and support the skate park at that event. It's hosted by Alias Resort. This is the part that I really want to tell you about. Last week, Kyle and I both attended online the ORTAB meetings and both of our projects, one with RTP, which is the Recreational Trails Program grant, and the Land and Water Conservation Fund, were both accepted well and well responded to, and we'll move forward in the process for further consideration. So for RTP, that kind of hopefully is a more certain-ish destiny to getting us working on the Middle Iditarod. Certainly things can change. There's more steps. For LWCF, this is the first time we've gotten this far in this process, but a final approval actually, while it gets recommended by the state, goes back to the National Park Service. So that one we don't necessarily understand exactly when we'll hear with any certainty the award or not, but probably in the fall. So we're excited about those. And then in addition, it's grant cycle season now with Anchorage Park Foundation and the Alaska Community Foundation. So we'll be putting together some grant ideas for those projects as well that fall within their guidelines. We're super active here. All of our links, they're ready for you, and other links that I've added since then because they seem to be handy. I know they're kind of buried in the report, but keep in mind that they're available to you. And then, you know, Kyle always talks about the budget, so we'll do that too. The service area balance is just under 400,000 for the undesignated fund. We certainly have been spending some money with snow removal. We don't have December yet, but we're looking good for the year. And certainly the clear and cold at the end or at the beginning of this year is probably helping us out for a little bit. Working at 92% of budget for public works. I'm sure there's other items still to come through. Everything else looking good and in alignment with where we were at the end of the year. And then we're not necessarily ready to work on this yet, but just to give you an idea of the lay of the land, this I put together before we had our meeting earlier today, but we have several meetings to hold and get together.
Thank you, Margaret.
Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
I just would say congratulations and thank you on those grants and putting them together. That's huge, and, you know, it just, and they're not easy to do, and they take a long time, and they're frustrating, and you keep trying, and made it this far, so keep our fingers crossed. But
Yeah, it's definitely a collaborative effort with me and Kyle and the different entities that we're working with to find funding. So in the case of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, we're working really closely with the Girdwood Lions Club. And, you know, and I know it takes a while to get it all together. So it's great. It's the best part of the whole thing.
oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, I'm sorry, I may have missed your hand before Margaret spoke, so go ahead.
That's fine. I've got a question on the budget. So I noticed that December, we don't have the December numbers yet for last year. Is there any concern that it could go over our allocation for roads? It seemed fairly busy December.
Agreed. I think we'll have to pose that question to Kyle, although
Okay.
the road supervisor is Amanda. Amanda, are you aware of any issue with the budget going over for the year?
You're on mute, Amanda.
Ha! My camera was on. Wrong thing. The last thing that Kyle and I talked about, or that Kyle mentioned, was that they are going to be at budget, and so that's why we aren't seeing them out and about while it's high pressure, so to try to save money. So I don't know about the actuals, but
Okay.
it could be close, and that's why we're kind of holding them back while we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's firm out there. Okay, anything else? Thank you again, Margaret. And we'll go to public comment. Persons offering public comment must state their full name and address. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person and must be on subjects not listed on the agenda. Crystal, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to pass along an invitation from Girdwood Inc. and Little Bears Playhouse in regards to the event we're holding on Thursday evening, 5 to 9 p.m. at Challenge Alaska. It is called Everyone for Girdwood, and the fundraiser is to support the Girdwood Workforce Childcare Project, which will be building the new childcare building in Girdwood. So hope to see you there. And if by chance you don't get a food ticket, we're still welcoming you to come out and see pictures and plans of the new building, and look forward to seeing you guys there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone in the room or online for public comment? Oh.
Okay, yeah. Hi, this is Amanda Tuttle. Especially as I'm looking at the agenda here, one of the things that's been kind of on my mind, and I don't know how this should be addressed. But we're looking at all these flood damage repairs that are going on to either Glacier Creek or anything off of California Creek. And we've got the roads covered, but has there been any consideration at looking at any damage along the trestle and the levee in Old Girdwood, and what assessment has been done? I don't think it's completely unreasonable to think that if all this other infrastructure that has contained that same water upstream has damage, have we checked downstream?
Crystal, your hand's still up just in case. Anyone else online for a public comment or in the room? Oh, board member.
My name is Linda Mankoff and I'm with the Girdwood Health Clinic. So I'm the community health worker. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that this week we're doing what's called the point in time, which is the nationwide count of homelessness. And fortunately, they're allowing us to count people who are living in their vehicles, which they did last year as well. We just can't count people who are couch surfing or inadequate housing, such as an elderly woman living on a cot in the hallway, can't be counted. But so that's happening on the 25th. And so that's happening nationwide, just so that HUD can figure out what kind of monies our area needs. And we are still counted in with the numbers of the municipality. So even Eagle River, they go out and do the same thing as we're going to do on Thursday night. It's the 25th, and we submit our numbers and it will come across as the municipality as a whole. Last year when we did it, we had 22 people that were willing to be recorded. That didn't mean we didn't have more. It's just that some people will say, I don't trust the government. I don't want for you to take my name, etc. This year, we expect it to be at least double for people who are willing to be logged as homeless and needing resources. But so even if we get 50 people, at least twice as much than we did last year, that still means we have more people. And I don't want to go on about it, but the homeless situation in Girdwood is growing before our eyes. I think we all know that. I'm just simply letting you know what's happening on the 25th point in time. Thank you.
So may I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
Would it be possible for you to come back and report that? Because since the numbers get scooped in with Anchorage and Eagle River, but you could possibly tell this board what the Girdwood numbers are that.
Absolutely. One of the things we're working with the coalition, the Coalition for Homelessness, we are working on maybe reporting on our zip code. And so that might, because they still need us to be part of the muni, but they were thinking maybe we could list it as that, because Eagle River is also trying to say, hey, we need some funding too, because the funding is all going to go into that to Anchorage, and obviously we need some kind of help. But yes, I could certainly let you know what those numbers are.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I know that the Girdwood Housing and Economic Committee is looking for those numbers too.
Yes.
Any other comments in the room or online? Please put your hand up. Okay, we'll go on to old business. Actual business. It's old. Number 6, GBUS action to assembly proposition for short-term rental permitting. Mike, your name is right here. It's on the screen.
I'll try and speak to this as much as I can. So there was a resolution brought forward in front of the Assembly, which they are discussing on Tuesday night. And this is basically a registration scheme. So it provides a license to short-term rentals. So short-term people operating short-term rentals have to apply for a license from the municipality. In doing so, they have to attest that they're going to meet certain rules or follow certain guidelines, such as provide a local contact, abide by trash and other ordinances that are across the municipality. There were also some requirements as well about how they advertise the short-term rentals. They should include the license number. There were some limitations to the size or the number of guests they can they can list as well based on the number of bedrooms. There is an S version which was also brought ahead, which has taken out some of those requirements. So I'd say the S version in general is a bit lighter and has less requirements, but it still includes the registration requirement. We already passed a resolution, I think last meeting, basically saying there are kind of four components we need for regulation in Girdwood, and this, at least the first version, the pre-S version, dealt with most of the of one of those categories of the kind of local nuisance issues. So the direct impact on immediate neighbours. What it didn't do and what it doesn't do is deal with the very high number of short-term rentals we have in the community and their huge impact on housing. There are a couple of proposals floating around about how to actually address that and how we can do that either with the this AO or without this AO. My sense at the moment is, and I'd be interested in Zach and maybe Randy, if Randy's on, he can speak to this. My sense is this is probably going to get passed pretty much as is. We at least have one proposal that probably achieves what we're looking for, even with this in place. I have some concerns about this proposal, but really the concerns that it doesn't go far enough, and that doesn't stop us from adding more to it. So I'm not going to move anything tonight, I don't think. I think my recommendation is we kind of, if anyone was interested in speaking to this, we can basically talk about the issues that Anchorage is seeing in general with short-term rentals are relatively light compared to the issues we see in Girdwood. We have a very different class of problem here. It's a completely different type of problem. It's a much more significant. And the solution suitable for Anchorage is nowhere near enough for the solution suitable for Girdwood.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board, or I could ask Zach or Randy if they have a response to any of those statements or questions, if no one from the board has anything.
I see Randy's here, but I'm not sure. He doesn't seem. I'm not sure if he's. Oh, there he is. I'll let Randy speak.
Thanks, Zach. Okay. Thanks, Randy.
Actually, Randy, could you just list the differences between the S and the original version, because I don't have that in front of me. Thank you.
We got a lot of feedback on the STRAO, and a lot of that feedback went into this document. In a way, it really hones it down to the purpose of not being restrictive, but of trying to gather data. They're trying to help enforce municipal code for the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the renter and the neighbors, i.e. we can pull the permit. It just cleans up some of the language, and we may have another version. I was contacted today by municipality legal on some changes they want to see. Not sure. I don't think they're too material, just kind of cleaning up the AO. But really what it's intended to do is gather that data and give a platform for future needs if it's needed. And again, Girdwood's very different than what Anchorage is experiencing.
Thank you, Randy. Mike, do you have anything following?
Yeah, so I think as we saw at the work session last week, there is already quite a bit of data about at least how extensive short-term rentals are. And I don't know if the presenter was able to give more detailed numbers for Girdwood using other commercial data providers. It's about 338 short-term rentals in Girdwood. So that's about a fifth, 20% of all the short-term rentals in the whole municipality, even though we're less than 1% of the population, and about 2% of the housing. So obviously, the rest of the muni, it's 1.5% short-term rentals. Girdwood is 20. It's a completely different scale of problem. So while it's disappointing that this isn't really addressing the things that are needed in Girdwood, I think it's a helpful first step. I hope that we are not told we have to wait a year or two to gather data that effectively is going to replicate data we already have before we can implement what we need in Girdwood. We've been waiting quite a long while to get this. I think this was originally proposed about 18 months ago, or discussed about 18 months ago. So we waited a long while. We've basically got the message that we shouldn't try and push through our own until this comes through. I think waiting even longer, another year or so, would be pretty unacceptable.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, Guy and
Sure. Yeah, Mike, so that, from coming out of our meeting on the 28th, did you attended the work session there for this at the Muni?
Both Jennifer and I attended the work session, and I'd be interested in Jennifer's comments as well. I think the work session was good. I think it was. I think a couple of members were surprised about how much data is already available for short-term rentals. I think what's interesting about short-term rentals is these are all advertised completely publicly. So this is information out in the public, and it's pretty easy to get that data. It's not like, it's not private information, it's public information. So I think that was one of the things that I saw from the work session. And the other thing is, I think, there are 10 members who don't represent an area with a very high number of short-term rentals. And they probably represent, they probably have voters who own short-term rentals in Girdwood, but they don't have any voters who live next to them or are sort of subject to the pressures on housing and environmental nuisance from short-term rentals. So, there's an interesting dynamic here. But overall, I thought it was a very good work session. I thought it was a very good discussion that came from it. And I think, I think this is useful, but nowhere near enough. And I really do hope this isn't used as an excuse for not allowing us to act for another year or so. We need to do something far sooner than that.
Does that answer your question, Guy?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I don't think anything with massive change is going to come about from this one meeting, but it's good that this was presented to the work group, and hopefully we can continue doing that. I think it's just chip away at it.
I think there was, sorry, just before Jennifer speaks,
No,
that's okay. Thank you. One, I think, interesting anecdote is there was a presentation from a company that tracks short-term rentals and helps municipalities track the data and sort of, gives them the data for enforcement. And they gave an example of one property, actually one very close to Amanda's house. They showed this, and I think everyone was surprised about, how much it was going for. I think the nightly rate was $750, $800 a night, and just the amount of money that's raised by this. I think that, again, it was interesting to see the reaction of assembly members. Again, I think they're used to how this occurs in Anchorage, where it's perhaps something which people don't, people only do 20 or 30 days a year or something, and not the, high saturation of full-time commercial short-term rentals that we have here. I think it is kind of interesting that the average nightly rate in Girdwood is about $360 or thereabouts, and the fine proposed, if you would be up to $300 a night. So it's actually the fine for not using the registration scheme at all, which is kind of the most egregious, is less than you'd make in an average rental. So it's not really quite calibrated for the environment here either.
Okay, thank you. It was a good work session. I recommend watching it. Jennifer?
Oh, yeah, I did want to thank Randy for all your work on this, because I know you worked a really long time on this, and I know you ended up getting just a whole lot of information about the wide variety of STRs out there and the ways in which they're used both in people's individual portfolios and within communities and everything else. So I appreciate your work on this. Thank you. I was impressed in the work session with, while the information might be public, it's incredible to have kind of the full buffet. It's different to have it consolidated in that regard, and it was startling. I've talked to several assembly members who were really startled at the amount of personal information that these consolidating platforms and basically, for lack of a better word, surveillance platforms can pull up at a drop of a hat. We were able to see the name and address and everything else of the owner. It was startling. But anyway, I did want to say, I think this is a good place to start, and I don't really know how we could change one of the things we had asked for was to be just a carve out on this. But one of the things I gained from the work session is that, and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it was news to me that there's no interest, if I understand correctly, in gaining funds above and beyond what's needed for administering the program. And so in that sense, I was concerned about creating yet another Anchorage bureaucracy like HLB that collects funds for us without letting us know what to do with them. But it sounds like that's not the intent at all. And so could you just confirm that for me?
Right. So the intent is the clerk would administer the program similar to a marijuana and alcohol. We did make a compromise that we did not want this to be another tax, another revenue stream. That's really covered by the bed tax that these properties pay. Now, and of course, we want to make sure that that bed tax is used in the right places for the right communities where it comes from.
Thank you.
Did that answer it?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. Brett had his hand up and now I don't see it. So
I had one follow-up comment, if that's okay. I wanted to pull up and agree with Jen as well. Sorry, I was remiss in I was jumping to issues with it rather than thanking Randy for the work that has been done on this, as I think this is a good first step. I hope this is a first step and we can follow it fairly soon with a second step. Because I kind of work in exactly this field of data, I think it was less of a surprise to me the amount of data that businesses have on us all. So to me, that's a ship that sailed a long while ago. I'm not surprised by that anymore. But I agree, it is surprise. I think it does surprise people when they see the degree of it. Thank you very much.
okay. Thank you, Mike. And oh yeah, I'm sorry, Matt.
Sorry.
You did have your hand. Matt.
No. Matt Schechter, and just to kind of piggyback, just going back to the short-term regulation in the current AO is that I kind of view it as that I assume it's going to kind of pass as like, I don't have much in the way to say on that, but in terms of Girdwood thinking about things and what we're actually thinking about in the GHEC is that, if we're going to make changes to or add to what the existing AO is, we know most likely it's going to be more restrictive. So what are the restrictive rules we need? But then the second aspect of it is that there may be proposals that we talk about in terms of abatements or incentives or something like that to basically move short-term rentals to long-term rentals. So there's kind of a funding aspect of it that takes place in some way, shape, or form, and I'm not sure how that cat gets skinned. But that's, I'm kind of thinking about, when we piggyback on kind of this STR regulation is to the community to kind of think about those two areas. And we'll be discussing them at GHEC in future meetings. So that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, from what we've heard this evening and the resolution that we already passed in December and hearing from our assembly representatives, does the body feel that we'll hold here and then see which version gets passed very soon and decide when we can soon make our next letter or statement?
Yeah, so my understanding is that GHEC is about to dive into this in more depth, kind of exactly what we would want on top of this. And so I'm happy to wait for them to do that work and see what they come up with. Sorry, Matt, did I?
No, I was going to actually just add information to that. So with the last meeting, one of the actually things we did under old business, which we actually skipped discussion about things like incentives. Simply because there was all the discussion on land. So we wanted that to be kind of at the forefront of the discussion. But we also there was also an item that Brett had related to like property tax abatement. So we actually combined those two into the kind of the same area late in the meeting. So we'll kind of have a broader, I think, hopefully discussion about various types of ways to kind of pay for this type of thing. And I kind of think about it, like you probably put 50 people in a room, you'll get 50 ideas, but 50 ways to think about paying. But that's, I think that's where we're kind of moving in terms of that.
Okay. Go ahead, Guy.
It's not a foregone conclusion it's going to pass either, right? So,
right.
I mean,
right. And they just had revisions today, it sounds like, so that Randy mentioned, and their advice to us seems to be to wait. But Mike, were you going to add one more thing?
Yeah, I just wondered if Margaret can move to the resolution we passed last time. I think that's in the packet. Maybe it isn't. Further back. Anyway, we covered the need for a the need to basically capture some of the bed tax, to fund mitigation for short-term rentals, given the high number of short-term rentals here and how they're affecting housing, and also that it should be used as a way to incentivize use of long-term rental as well. And there are various proposals, or 2 or 3 proposals out there at the moment for ways to do that. So as long as we keep having a broad discussion on alternatives, I think that'll be great.
Okay. Thank you. It is up here. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for the discussion on this. And thank you again, Randy, for all of your work on this, and Meg Solitel as well. I will move to the next item if there's no other actions. Number 7, GBOS appointment of 2 members of the SAC board. Margaret, do you want to start this one?
Sure.
Oh, Amanda has her hand up too.
That's good.
Amanda, go ahead.
Oh, if Margaret wants to start, that's fine.
What I have to offer is that PSAC currently has 2 vacancies, and as of this afternoon, we have 2 applications or 2 people expressing interest. So that is helpful. I think the search for people to serve on that board has brought about some other ideas and conversations about how PSAC really operates and what its intent was compared to what it actually does. And I know that a couple of you have served as the PSAC supervisor liaison. So, I don't think that any of what I'm going to say is really new information. But PSAC was originally started because when we started with Whittier Police Service, or any contracted policing service, we really didn't know what that was going to look like. We'd never had sort of self-determination in policing. And we wanted to give an avenue for people to come in and say what they liked and didn't like about it. And I suppose, overall, that's been successful. We've certainly had some conversations, but they're not necessarily the volume or type that we were afraid of, concerned about having in a meeting such as this, So they've all been things that have been relatively manageable about, for example, requesting additional speeding supervision or surveillance, some assistance with just neighborhood issues, I suppose, things involving noise complaints, pretty generic things. What PSAC has done as well that was within what we were expecting originally is assist with the review of the contracts that have come up since then. I think we're on our 2nd contract with Whittier. And those things at this point are not necessarily an opportunity to provide brand new ideas. It's really about fixing the boilerplate to address whatever needs to be addressed. But it's not the whole chasm of things that could go into a contract as was the situation originally. So we don't know where that's going. Right now we have a contract with Whittier that is in place and is going to be in place for some time. And as we get closer to the deadline date, we'll have to figure out how to approach that. So the conversation then went to, maybe similar to the roads contract, the policing contract is ready to just be something that's administered through the office. Obviously, Kyle and I would always be here to take comments as we are on the roads. Maybe we could still have a supervisor who oversees public safety, or maybe we create a community liaison and perhaps turn PSAC into something that's more like volunteer group that helps to just kind of get the word out about, hey, we have Whittier Police for like various community events. So anyway, I think just opening up the topic, I have talked a little bit to, we only have 2 current members on the PSAC board, and I think I've spoken with both of them about it just to kind of feel them out. But anyway, just kind of offering that as an idea for future consideration. And I don't know, Amanda, what else you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you. That was a great introduction and synopsis. I think that, like Margaret said, the issues that we deal with can be probably handled like the roads contract through the office, and I think, yeah, a community liaison or a community-led effort that's not necessarily administered or has that office presence managing the meetings and what have you might be a good transition point for PSAC. They do amazing work. I've really appreciated working with them the last couple of years. I think that we have, throughout the last 3 years, I've noticed this struggle to get enough people on the board, people showing up for board meetings, and I think it's, yeah, maybe time to reevaluate the need for a public safety advisory committee.
Thank you, both of you, for explaining that really thoroughly. And I would just add that in the years that I've attended several of the meetings, and they're often, not too often, but there's not every single month the need for a meeting or a quorum every meeting, but it is a welcome space for people to bring their comments, but that could also be brought to the office where they could meet face to face or email, and it'd still be getting to the same recipient, because not many people are hearing the comments. And then eventually it would come to GBOS if it was something we needed to address after that. Any comments from the board?
I served on the PSAC board shortly after coming to the end of the first contract we had with Whittier, and we were looking at a 3-year contract and so there was a lot of contract work on it going on. I was fairly busy, but one thing I did appreciate was Chief O'Shea and just the interaction that meeting kind of had with Whittier Police Department. There was good back and forth during those meetings, and I don't know if we need them to have them every month or if we just have a supervisor and not a committee, and you know, maybe set up a quarterly meeting or something. But I just sure appreciated Chief O'Shea, and then the officers would occasionally come by too, and it was just a good way to get to know that and open that up to the public. So,
thank you, Jennifer.
Since I was also on PSAC, I would agree with Guy that it was great hearing from police, but I'd really like to get to where that's report is given to GBOS instead, similar to Chief Weston, which I know we have a space for, but the current system, the police chief has to show up twice. And so I thought, you know, maybe we could streamline it and have that similar to Chief Weston's report, have the police report here as well, because, you know, I think it has ramifications for a lot of the decisions we make, about everything from roads to budgeting. So anyway, that's what I would say.
Thank you. I'll go in order. So Chief Weston, go ahead.
I was one of the original committee members. I would say that the committee really had a good function in the beginning, but I do think that it's kind of redundant with GBOS. If it goes away, I think it would be nice to have a quarterly meeting between police and fire and the roads, and Kyle, the service area manager, which I think Kyle is already doing with police. And then, you know, since I've gone to a lot of these meetings over the years, it's never gained a following in the community where a number of community members would come and talk about their issues with police. And I think that's what it was sort of set up for originally. And I've never seen more than maybe occasionally one person show up to talk about things, but I've never seen like more than one show up as a member of the public. So versus the bigger audience, which is at GBOS. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Weston, and for your suggestions as well. Mike, and then Amanda.
Yeah, I was also one of the original members of PSAC along with Chief Weston, and you know, we obviously were working hard on the contract at the time, and then I think we had concerns about how things could potentially go with the contract, and I think based on a lot of the comments we're hearing now, about there's not as much going on in that particular committee. I think that's a sign of maturity, and it's a sign that actually things are working very well, and the contract is being managed very well, and there's a good match between the Girdwood community and Whittier Police. So I think if we do decide to sort of sunset and restructure our committees and maybe not continue with PSAC, I think that should be a sign of success and a sign of PSAC success.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thanks. One more plug for the changing the structure would be that we have a limited number of volunteers that maybe they could be put into other volunteer roles. Hopefully they'd be interested in increase their volunteer pool anyways. And then I like Jennifer's point of streamlining. So
Okay, thank you. It sounds on my end like we're all agreeing and coming to the same conclusions. So if this is under old business, if anyone would like to move anything, or Margaret?
Yeah,
obviously.
Mike, Margaret had her hand up, so in case she wants to jump in. I don't hear you anyway, Mike.
I'll wait for Margaret.
Sorry, I meant to jump in there. I think that maybe, we've not tried to figure out how to undo a committee like this before. So, I've kind of been thinking about, based on the direction that this conversation might go, how to go forward. And I would really like for the current members of PSAC to have an opportunity to, more than casually talk to me about it. So maybe holding their regular meeting and get a gauge for what people say then. And, if a whole bunch of public comes to that meeting and says, no, we find value in this meeting the way that it is, then, I don't feel strongly that it needs to change just to change. Like if it seems like everybody is in agreement that we can manage things properly and certainly not lose anything by shifting the technique of it, then I think that would be good. So I'm personally not looking for a motion from you or now or anytime.
Thank you for that. Okay. Mike.
That's exactly what I was going to do, not offer a motion. I was just going to point out that we have an item coming up in new business later for update of GBS rules and procedures, which includes kind of reviewing all the committees we have, and I think it neatly falls into that. So I think I feel comfortable. It's been a great discussion. I feel comfortable pushing it to a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, your hand's up one more time.
I wonder what we are going to do with this. The agenda item is actually for the appointment of 2 members. So we maybe I could move to postpone the appointment to our next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Guy?
Yeah. No, I guess that would be after PSAC meets again and discusses it as well, right? So.
Yeah, their first meeting's early February. Any other questions or comments? We'll go by assent on this. Are there any objections? Okay, the motion passes. And okay, thanks again, Margaret, for that and everyone. Number 8, temporary workforce housing proposal. The slides are in the packet and on the screen. And this is, many of us have heard this quite a few times. So, Mike, please go ahead.
I'm going to try and go through this very quickly so I don't lose my voice. As Brianna said, this has been presented many times. The ask, I think at the end, at least what I'm going to ask is a motion that we approve this in principle, but go away and come up with details. So it's in an implementable form and then review that before it goes on any further. So that's just a preview. I'll be asking in the end. Purpose here is very simply, this is a way to temporarily, for about 3 years, details to be determined finally, remove some of the restrictions that prevent commercial owners of commercial land from using that land for temporary workforce housing. There is with very limited exceptions, there's no way to have temporary housing within Girdwood or really within the municipality as a whole. And that means, as we know about building costs, that means that you have to invest a lot of money to provide any housing. So the idea here is it provides a bridge between now and when we can get some, better workforce housing, which maybe, realistically is about 3 years or so, through non-profit or through other mechanisms. So this gives us a bridge and a way for, in many cases, employers or at least commercial landowners to help provide some solutions here. It also means that we as a local government are not really getting in the way. We're doing the opposite. We're getting rules and regulations out of the way and allowing businesses to come up with their own solutions within general framework. And that general framework, if you go on to the next, slide. Actually, let's go to the slide after this and I'll come back to process. Yeah, so the general framework there is, as I said, we take away a lot of the restrictions that stop this from happening now. It allows much lower cost solutions. So we had an example last year where one of the commercial landowners actually let people stay, let people camp, put their RVs on their land. And that's obviously, basically no cost to the landowner. And in the end, that provided that there was I think there was a complaint to land use, and the owner was threatened with fines and things like that. So it did end, but it ended right at the end of the window. But we want to make sure that there aren't those sets of there are reasonable uses of the land, and if you want to do something which is actually, rather than just let people stay there, if you want to do something like actually put in housing, you need to know that what you're doing is legal. You need to know that something is allowed, and you're not going to get land use enforcement to come and demand that you get rid of it and start fining you if you don't. So this is a way to allow businesses that say they want to invest in being part of the solution to invest in being part of the solution, and to invest at a much lower threshold. So it's not going to be many hundreds of thousands for each structure. It does have some restrictions though. This can't be building more short-term rentals. It can't be more visitor accommodation. It has to actually be housing for residents. There's been a suggestion of, can we make this local employees? I've looked at some other communities of how they've done this, and when the land is owned by the municipality, there are options. When it's not owned by the municipality, I haven't seen examples of that being done. There may be some way to do that. That's something we'll definitely look into further. But we know that we could definitely do this and allow a private relationship between the landowner or their land manager and the tenants. In order for it to be workforce housing has an actual federal definition. There are some cost limits around that. So again, what we don't want is this to be a way to create sort of new high-end visitor accommodations. This is really meant to be for people, a lower reasonable cost housing within the community. There's some pushback on the idea of administrative site review. There's a balance here. There's a process whereby the community become aware of the details of a proposal before it happens, and that's the administrative site review process. It does have a cost associated with it, or things can just be permitted by right, in which case you won't necessarily have any notice or awareness of things are happening until they happen. I think that's an interesting point for the community to weigh in on. Again, I have a preference for the administrative site review process, because that gives the community generally visibility of what's going on, which I think would be helpful at the beginning. But I think there's a good argument for looking at both sides of that. If we go back to the previous slide on process. Thank you. So this is a fairly detailed proposal, but it's not at the level of detail that you can answer every question and have code passed by the assembly. We can't pass code. We can only ask. The assembly are the ones who actually pass code. They may or may not decide, if we present them with something like this, they may or may not decide to pass it through planning and zoning. I think there's an argument for and there's an argument against. The argument against is it can be done very quickly if it doesn't go through planning and zoning. And the argument for is it gives another level of review and another level of checks. What I expect to happen is if we decide tonight that we want to go ahead with this, we'll start working with Assembly and try and get some particular proposal together, and then it would go through at least one work session with the community. At least one committee, I believe, with the Assembly, possibly P&Z review, but probably not. Possibly work session, and then we again have another round of looking at it when the details are all defined, and then there'll be a public hearing at least at the Assembly, and formal action or formal decisions by GBOS or land use or any other groups here. So that's the process. There's a set of questions I listed at the end of this, a set of questions that should come before, and I think there's a few others probably to add to that. And rather than address these directly, I think we'll just open up for questions in general, any comments from the board. Well, I'll hand it back to, what I'll do is hand it back to Brianna, and she can add to this or go into questions.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. And there's been at every meeting, several questions or submitted to Mike or myself was questions, and then a lot of the same individuals asking the same things. So if anyone has any further questions, this has obviously been something that has been, some of our public comment tonight is addressing things that are very apparent, and it's very cold outside, and we definitely have a problem where people that are houseless cannot go get a bus pass to go to Anchorage or have services that they can get in Anchorage. So this is an option, and it is something that if we are able to pass tonight, it can then have a possibility with the Assembly to work out all the details. So like Mike said, this is a general framework and structure. And the feedback that I have been given in support is that this is an example of new and more ideas that are beneficial for the community, and businesses are in support of any future low-income housing in Girdwood Valley, both RV and similar units to, for example, Creekside Complex, which is not this, but that's the kind of support I have heard. And there's definitely a need for more alternative solutions, and this is exactly one of those. Any other comments from the board? See Amanda's hand up.
Can I make a motion to approve the temporary workforce housing proposal?
You can. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. We'll have any further discussion as well. Any other
There's
comments?
one other thing I'd like to add. So although this would have a sunset provision, so it would absolutely be temporary and have a time at which it finishes. One of the ideas behind this is that it gives the opportunity for experimentation. So it gives the opportunity for people to actually try tiny homes, for example, or try other cabin solutions or pallet shelves or whatever the choice is. And that gives us an opportunity to look and see what works, what doesn't work, and potentially inform us for more permanent changes to our land use code. So this gives us a window of several years in which to see what works. And if we do want to make more permanent changes, we can use examples which are successful as a starting point for that, as opposed to just speculative changes in the future. So that's another potential benefit here.
Hi, Amanda.
Could I ask, what are the kind of next steps if it were to be approved? Where would it go next?
So what we do is take this framework and try and turn it into some actual code, which could be acted upon, and that would include all the details and answer a lot of the questions that people ask.
Okay, we have a comment in the room here. Go ahead, Amanda.
Okay.
You had your hand up first.
Okay, yeah. So hello, I am Amanda Tuttle. I'm the owner of Coast Pizza. As many of you are aware, I've had a very difficult time staffing the restaurant, particularly with skilled labor. The number one issue is always housing. At one point in time, I was directly involved with over 50% of my full-time employees' housing leases. Still to this day, I am actively informed of every single employee's living situation, because anytime there's a change in their lease, I face the possibility of losing a full-time staff member, which I only have 9 of. Needless to say, it's needlessly stressful. Additionally, I currently have 2 full-time employees who are houseless. They both live in cargo trailers at this very moment. Both are older in age, both have significant health issues. I have legitimate concerns over their safety between temperatures, snow loads, and their ailments that come with age and health. I do everything that I can to assist them, but unfortunately, my hands are tied due to our current and outdated land use plan and zoning regulations. Currently, I own in Old Girdwood 5 small vacant commercial lots. All of my lots are zone GC2, which is the Girdwood Station Seward Highway Commercial District. All GC2 lots are currently prohibited for any residential housing uses and any commercial housing uses, with the exception of a conditional use of me building a hotel. I believe it is true that every other commercial lot in Old Girdwood is zone GC3, which allows for residential and commercial housing in Old Girdwood, all of which are across the street from me, and I cannot build residential or commercial housing. Passing this amendment would allow me to provide a safe and stable housing situation for my current long-term employees. It would also provide a fallback system for my current employees who do have homes currently, but at times find themselves in between housing leases. I don't have the money to go out and buy a home in this community to house staff like some of the other restaurant owners have done. It also seems silly to ask for another type of resolution to my restaurant's problem if a simple fix of passing this amendment would allow me to better serve my staff and the needs of my business without further exhausting any more of your guys' time and resources from this already exploited community. In addition to my current long-term employees, passing this amendment would also allow me to apply and hire for my own J1s. Due to the fact I do not own my own housing for employees, I am not allowed to apply for my own J1s and must use the resort's J1s, as I do not have enough staff to operate the restaurant without the additional coverage they provide. Currently, I have 12 J1s on staff. Although this at face value sounds like a great solution, it is not. Since the resort is the J1's first employer, a J1 first works the first 40 hours of the week for the resort, and then I schedule the J1 with the hours that are left after they work their initial 40 hours, which is usually not conductive to the hours that I need staffing for. Not only is scheduling my own restaurant very labor intensive with the J1s, due to this, each time their schedule changes at the resort, it changes the schedule at Coast. It is this very knee-jerkish and frankly a very bad business model that in time will fail. Not to mention the resort's J1 housing is literally 4 miles from Coast Pizza. This is daily logistics trying to get carless employees to and from work when I have a property that's a block and a half away from my restaurant that I could house people on. I truthfully do not know at this point which direction I would take if this amendment was to pass. I do know that I would be elated to have options to break this repetitious cycle that I have been in. If there is one thing I've learned about doing business in this community, it is that not only do we have a housing crisis, it in turn has depleted the ability for potential new business growth within this community outside of already established businesses. A business that requires more than 15 employees in this community will not survive or even cease to exist at all if the businesses do not have a resolution to the housing issue. Not only would I be very grateful for your support to help me in my business, my employees would be the biggest benefactor of this amendment passing, and I truly, guys, hope you help me in Coast Pizza. Guy, your hand.
Yeah, I guess one thing I do like about this, it seemed like, as we talked about this over the last few meetings, that there was going to be some more definition to this and where we're at, and this is where we're going forward. I do like this process, though it's going to make it a little longer. I'd like to hear what planning and zoning says, and making broad scale code changes can benefit us for sure, but there's always unintended consequences as well. So I support this, particularly under the process that is proposed.
Thank you, Guy. We'll go with Brett online. Your hand is up.
Oh, thank you. So, yeah, this is an interesting one because I also see a pathway for that lot to be rezoned to accommodate worker housing without affecting the rest of the valley. So my question is, since this is proposed as being temporary, wouldn't the business owner also be in the same jeopardy in 3 years when this expires? It would be more of a permanent solution to rezone that lot down in Old Girdwood and try to accommodate what the business owner or the commercial owner is trying to accomplish without enabling other commercial property owners to start mini home and pallet home type of developments in commercial space. That has a significant impact long term. And already I'm hearing just in the plea that this is an ongoing problem and that just 3 years is not going to solve this. If it expires, it's going to be not only that problem, but again, worse. I think that just rezoning that lot in Old Gird would be a permanent solution, potentially, or at least requiring administrative site review to do this type of pallet home or mini home or trailer home type of installation. So although in one case it may be beneficial to the property owner, I think there's another path that's available that would have far less impact and would be more permanent.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Mike, do you want to respond to the question or take that as a comment?
No, I'll take the comment.
Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Kathy Troutner, and I've been aware of the situation that Amanda Tuttle has faced in that old Girdwood property of hers, and she really tried to put something together for her employees. And I don't know, and maybe this came up because of Brett's comments. If this were a temporary situation for the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years is what I'm hearing for this possible plan. Could she, for instance, apply during that time for a change in zoning to get it commercial residential, even while there's this temporary thing going on? That would be one question. But my question originally when I raised my hand was with the questions that I can read here about enforcement. Just to clarify, so the affidavit at application, that affidavit is referring to the owner of the commercial property?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and would that person be then held responsible for enforcement then when it's time to vacate the property, when this expires?
So because there would be a fixed expiry date on the whole process, that land use would no longer be available at that point. Any leases, I would expect, would have that same termination date. But just a nuance on what you said earlier, Kathy, I agree with you. There's an opportunity to make other permanent changes on your commercial land during this 3-year window or thereabouts. But we also are just about to release a draft comprehensive plan, and what will follow that is a change to our land use code. So a lot of the problems that have been sitting in Chapter 9 for many years, we have an opportunity to review and fix. So the situation, 3 years, it's an interesting thing that these two could coincide, because in 3 years' time we may have broader options or better options for this anyway, which may not require rezoning. So there's several paths here and there's several things going on at the same time, but this seems like a relatively easy lift, and it does definitely reduce the I don't know how much a rezone costs. I hear 50,000-60,000. So at least that's been quoted in other contexts. So, the idea of just to be able to house the first person is going to cost you 60,000 plus whatever you're investing in housing. Seems a little excessive. Now, maybe it's only 20 or 30, I don't know. But it's another barrier which I don't think is necessary at the moment. But it's something that can be done long term, definitely.
Well, we definitely have to start doing something, and I think that, some energy going in this direction is a very good idea. And thank you for all your work on it, you and Brianna and Jennifer, everyone.
Thank you, Kathy. And thanks, Mike, for the answers as well and ideas. Any other comments? Jennifer?
Yeah, I want to say a couple things. I think that there are some interesting ideas in here, but I would like to say that in terms of, I am very nervous about dealing with a somewhat localized issue with broad area-wide changes like this. And in particular, I knew of your situation years ago, reached out to you, never heard back, suggested zoning changes several years ago, never heard back, reached out to you again, didn't hear back. So I do have a little bit of an issue now with making area-wide changes based on something that you've had a couple of options presented to you and you didn't work with me at all. So, well, okay, but I'm not sure that this is the one and only way to deal with this. But more precisely, in terms of process, a couple things. I'm not comfortable with passing something in principle. I'm going to put that in air quotes. I am not comfortable with that at all. I don't believe in passing something in principle. The chair made the comment that there have been a number of the comments and oh my goodness, they're the same. Well, one of the reasons you're hearing the same comments is because the questions haven't been answered. And a very big one is, while I appreciate, I'm super excited about tiny homes. I've got a whole folder on tiny homes. I've been excited about tiny homes for years. I am not excited about allowing tiny homes when we don't have any way to handle enforcement. It's one thing to tow an RV that doesn't belong in a certain place. We have no way to tow tiny homes, pallet homes, all this stuff. And there is a sense of permanence to them that's a little bit different too. That so once we set them up and they've spent 3 years having a tiny home committee, a community in some area, and then we're going to come in as G-Boss and say, okay, go away now. I just, you give people a privilege, it becomes a right within a short amount of time. But even more importantly than that, more importantly than all of my concerns, I feel like the community has not had time to vet this because it's been presented as, well, it's sort of kind of like this. We should not be passing something that's sort of kind of like this that could change us really dramatically, because this affects much of the Alyeska Highway as you come in. The current comprehensive plan has much of this area going in as potentially commercial. Like, we are looking at potentially expanding our commercial zones tremendously. So it's one thing to talk about this now, and then 4 months later, it becomes applicable to a greater area of land. If we don't have the Girdwood area plan done yet, like, that has got to be done first. And I am not comfortable with having a assembly work session on this before we've had a community work session on this. And in particular, this hasn't even gone through GHEC correctly in the way it has before. I've just been double checking with our GHEC members, and I'm not hearing that they feel like this has been vetted. We particularly asked our GHEC people to step up and spend hours and hours of their time based on their community experience. And so we have realtors, we have builders, and we have people who spend time with housing, we have financial folks, and that is where this should have started. This should have started there so that we could turn this into something that we could vote on more precisely than quote unquote in principle, not knowing the answers to questions that we've now been asking for I don't know what, at least 4 meetings in a row. So that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Kaylee, hand is up next.
Thanks. I just wanted to voice my support for this. I think it's a short-term sort of gives us some way to deal with things in the immediate rather than waiting until something's been developed or hopefully developed in 3 years or whatever amount of time. I, as a community member and also as one that works with folks that have a hard time finding housing, some of them are employee housing, some of them are not employee housing, and friends and neighbors who have left because they can't find housing here. And this isn't about places that they can buy. These aren't people that are purchasing homes. They aren't going to purchase homes. They will not be able to afford that and work at the resort in the positions that they're in. What they can do is rent from employers, or, you know, they aren't going to be able to work at the brewery, or they're not going to be able to work at Coast Pizza, or they're not going to be able to work at Hightower and afford to buy as an employee. So this allows those folks an opportunity to get in and get some stable rent, and that's connected through their employer, and it's awesome. So with the sundowner clause, I'm fully confident in it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kaylee. In order then, Mike was next.
Hi. Yeah, this has been on the agenda twice and I presented twice to GHEC. They haven't chosen to act on it, but obviously a member of GHEC has to pass a motion. There was one thing that you said, Jennifer, which I'd just like to clarify I understood correctly. You said that every proposal has to start from a member of GHEC. That's how I understood you said, and I don't believe that was definitely not how we set it up. I probably misinterpreted you. If you could just clarify what you meant, thank you.
No, sorry. I don't believe that at all. So I'm not sure where that came from, but no.
Okay, thanks for answering that.
I think it was based on the way you phrased things. So maybe I just misunderstood what you meant behind that. But thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Can I clarify that?
Yes.
No, I don't think it should start. And you know what? I could understand the frustration. I've noticed this show up on the agenda and not get its time. But my understanding from the committee members was that there was kind of the biggest emergency in their minds was for good reason, I think, was the Holton Hills proposal and what to do when that showed up. So GHEC felt that they kind of tossed right into the fire because they were as taken aback by that as the whole entire community was. Like, none of us had any idea that that was going to show up. And then the same thing with the STR thing, which had been kind of kicking around, but then all of a sudden seemed to gain a lot of momentum. So GHEC was really focused on dealing with the biggest fires first. But I understand, a sense of frustration that my understanding is that this is still in the roster and still needing to be talked about, and they understand that. But the last meeting went on for almost 3 hours. Like, you do have to sometimes be able to say stop already, right? So I don't think that was deliberate or that it got deliberately sidelined. It just didn't fit with the priorities of those particular meetings, just given what we all of a sudden all have going on. So anyway, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. I'll go with Stay Alalieska.
Hey, it's Lene. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to reiterate what I've said at past meetings. I'm a part of the Girdwood Chamber, and I also sit on the trustees for the Methodist Church. I know the chamber reached out to all of our members, and we haven't heard back, or people haven't shown up at meetings saying that this is something applicable to their business that they would want to apply. And I guess, to me, before something like this would be passed, I would really want to hear with those with the commercial lots saying that this is something that they would do. I do want affordable housing. I do know businesses are struggling, but I don't think something should be passed without it being viewed as a need by the community or the people who own the commercial lots who would apply it. Right now, we've got one business who says this is something they've wanted, and we've known they've wanted it for many, many years. But we haven't heard from any of the other businesses. And I would like to see the room full of those businesses saying, please do this. Just like with Holton Hills, you got so many people who showed up and voiced their opinions. I'm just not seeing anybody in the community coming forward to advocate for this besides now one business. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go into the room next. Matt.
I would just say, in terms of dealing with GHEC, just kind of hearing Amanda's story, kind of echo what Brett says, but I'm assuming that if there are a couple of 2 or 3 different commercial property owners that have different situations, like if demand is simply a zoning situation, like we should be fighting for that. Like, that's the permanent solution that helps her out best. So how can we rally around to kind of help her with that situation? That may be different than another commercial business owner here that has a different situation. And so I'd rather have a situation that permanently fixes her problem than temporarily fixes her problem. So that's how I got it. So
thank you. Kaylee next.
Yes, I just wanted to, I guess, clarify or cover one of the issues. I hear some, disappointment that more business owners haven't shown up or didn't answer the calls from one of our GBOS members or something at some point in the past. But I feel like these are all sort of raising the bar or, try to obfuscate the issue for whatever reason. I think we have done and will continue to do, I'm sure in the future, not pass things only if they have a room full of people show up for them. There have certainly been cases where I've been frustrated by that's how this works, but it has worked that and will continue to do so. So I hear that. And I do understand that the chamber has sent out polling, which is great because I think it does sort of cover a certain subset of people, but it's not covering the people that need the housing. So, yes, employers, but to employees, no, it's not asking them anything. And so I guess some of my issue has always been that a lot of the discussion goes on about the expertise of people or the developers or the real estate agents or the, all of these things. But again, those aren't the people that need housing. And so while I do value those folks' opinions, I value everyone's opinion. And I think that we should all be keeping in mind who we're trying to serve with this housing quest. And along that line, I've been a little frustrated in the past about GHC spending so much time focusing on the soccer field issue, the potential extraction, all of those things that we're not actually tackling housing in any timely manner. So again, I support it, and I'd love to see other proposals coming up that can do something in the immediate as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. And I just like to add that with some of the recent comments that many of the businesses, well, they're all unique. So every business owner is doing what they can in their world to staff and maybe do something on their property that's legal or not. And they have seasonal employees perhaps, or they use J1s, or they find other rentals in Girdwood. And every year it's a struggle, and it's evolving and changing. So with this structure, I feel like it can spread out some of the issues that maybe one business isn't always enduring every year. And I've worked with people that want to live in their vehicle or have to find a place to park. And in the summer, it doesn't stick out so much and it's not that much of an issue. But this is year round. It's been going on for decades, but it's just more visible now. And we don't have all the resources here in Girdwood. So I feel comfortable with this structure and then sending it to the assembly where they can work out the details with work session or planning and zoning, and then coming back to us again. It will come back to us as it's proposed. So we'll have one more comment from Brett.
Thank you for that. Right. And I guess that with the lack of audible support from those commercial property owners that would benefit from this, minus the one, it's, wow, oh, I get my thought together. There is no direct employer-employee requirement for any of this that is called workforce housing. And to categorize workers in the workforce to only be able to live in accommodations that are substandard or subvalued is somewhat offensive. So the larger issue here is how this will impact the commercial properties in Girdwood by providing pallet and mini home and mobile home type installations that become a real problem to remove with a sunset period. We do not have local enforcement in this. This is on the promise of something in the future, and unfortunately, it's misguided. There is already a process by which the commercial landowner can rezone and accommodate the development that they may want to invest in for their workers. It does not require placing trailers, mobile homes, mini homes, pallet homes, and such on commercial lots in Girdwood. So there's a permanent way to do this, and then there's a misguided temporary way to do it. And unfortunately, this was only brought up to GHEC for one meeting, where we did not have an opportunity to run it through a 2-meeting process for input. So it was introduced after the fact, after it was already introduced through LUC and GHE and GBOS. So that is why the advice of that advisory committee has been trying to catch up to this proposal. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Guy?
Yeah, I felt this proposal was originally very rushed, and it did set a lot of people back and kind of wonder where it's coming from, and raised a lot of questions and a lot of good questions. And input from the community that was here. I think part of, I guess I have a question for the author of this, and then part of it is too, is this housing is, we got to group it together to try to come up with ideas. And I saw some of those ideas squashed or want to be squashed right away because some people didn't like them. And it just, I could not understand why you wouldn't let them vet that and work through it. And I pushed back on that because whether I even agreed with the project or not, I think we need to look at it. None of it, this is such a complex issue that, it's kind of all hands on deck. So, the recency of this is part of the reason that I support this process that's being proposed tonight, is because let it run the process. Let's see what it produces. I would think, I guess, Mike, a question, I wouldn't want to see this laid on the table at the assembly meeting for zoning changes without explicit consent from the committees here. And, you say it'll come back through there, and I would just so I understand correctly, this will not be something that we'll see laid on the table by an assembly member. It'll come back through us, and our committee and our community will have final say on it before it gets that far.
I hope that we can absolutely provide whatever draft comes out of it here, and I'd be happy to do that.
Mike, you also had your hand up, so how about you go ahead?
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. I think there was a lot of criticism that there was nobody, no business owners had stood up and spoken in favor. Now the criticism is only one. I suspect that we're going to get criticism it's only 2 or 3 or 4. But more seriously, I know that other business owners have answered that survey that the chamber has put out in favor. So I'm not sure why maybe Lene hasn't seen the results yet, but I think the other members of the chamber have, and other members have responded. Other business owners have responded positively. So hopefully the chamber can share that data. I think that would be helpful to us. And the other thing, I think Brett is mistaken. You can look back at the minutes and agendas and see that this has been presented twice at 2 different GHEC meetings. So it is definitely 2, not 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Lene, go ahead.
Yeah, quick response to Mike's. I don't have the information in front of me, and I know Patty's not online tonight, but we can ask her to submit that information for what the results were from the businesses. And then just a comment in the fact that, yes, kind of said what Kaylee was saying, there are lots of employees and people who need housing around here, but if we don't hear from the commercial landowners that say that this is how they want to use their land, it doesn't do any good to put this in place because it wouldn't serve the employees looking for housing. And so I just think it's you know, it's great to be brainstorming and putting so many things out there for ways that we can try to work on this. But, you know, where are the commercial landowners saying that this is a way they would choose to use their land? It's kind of like the nightly rental problem where someone's got a second home and they choose not to go long term because they still want to have the opportunity to use their property when they want. So they go nightly. Same thing. The employees need housing, but if you don't have the commercial person that says, I'm willing to tie up my land for 3 years and let people do this, it's going to go nowhere. And I don't want something to go nowhere. I do want the employee thing addressed because I do know businesses are suffering. But again, if someone's not going to use their commercial land in that way, it's doing all of this work for something that won't have a result. And just wanting to be sure before something's put in place that there is that opportunity for these businesses, these landowners wanting to use their land in that way. And it would in fact result in a win for Girdwood. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Lynn.
you.
I appreciate that, and I hope we get those those results. Thank you.
Thanks. I was going to go in order with Kaylee next. Kaylee, would you like to go? Was your hand up?
It was up. I will put it down and let Brooke speak because he hasn't spoken yet. But I guess the one comment I would say, I appreciate what Lene had to say there. I think you know, I hear particularly Lene's comment makes a lot of sense to me. I understand where she's coming from, and we don't happen to agree on the conclusion, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's, from what I've heard though in this meeting and in previous particularly, is there's a bunch of weird NIMBYism about what we do and what don't want to look at in town. And so I think that might have something to do with the attempted squashing this at one level or another, but who knows? And secondarily, if, you know, what we're looking at or how the town looks or how people think this will end up looking, you know, somewhere in their neighborhood is an issue, but yet at the same time, we're saying that there's no one here going to take advantage of it. I guess I think that's a bit of an odd position to take, but please, thank you. You can call him Brooke. I'll put my hand down.
Thank you,
Brooks,
Kaylee.
sorry.
Brooks,
Point of order, I'm sorry. I do want to step in and just say, and I've said before, I would like to see us keep our conversations polite. And so if we could avoid name calling, and I have said before that I will call it out when it happens. And so it is happening. And Kaylee, I'm asking you to please not do it again. Are we clear?
Is the point of order a question?
The point of order is no, the point of order is that this is rude and it is against our policies to have name calling. And it needs to be called out, not by me, but by the chair. But I will do so as co-chair if you do not step up. That needs to stop. I find it deeply upsetting. You have several times here not only mischaracterized comments, but cast them in very negative light. And that is not respectful dialogue. But I would like to hear Brooks speak, please.
I would also like to hear Brooks speak if your hand is up, Brooks.
Yes, thank you. There were a couple of things I wanted to say. One is just some observations. First, we as a community, we have to get to yes on something, or problems don't get solved. And I'm just going to make a general statement that it's a lot easier to be against something than it is to work through the very difficult process of building solutions that can get people to yes. And in this particular proposal, in some respects, the devil is going to be in the details. So the reason people bring something forward in principle is that they don't want to spend a lot of time developing the details if they know there's no support for it, either within the community or at GBOS. And, you know, frankly, I can't tell where we are on this particular proposal with regard to that, but that's the reason you deal with something in principle. And I would certainly expect in terms of the process that once the details got developed, they would in fact run through the housing committee with a, you know, much more detailed proposal and then come back to GBOS if in fact the board wanted to approve this in principle. Third thing I wanted to say is that there is a flip side to the point that, well, nobody that owns commercial property is saying they want to use it, and therefore no good will come of it. The flip side to that is, well, if no one uses it, no harm will come of it. And so that's sort of it's something that has two sides to that sort of take on it. And it's definitely, I mean, if I was going to be spending hours working on something, I would probably not want to do it if nobody was going to use it. So, that I'm not going to spend hours working on it. So that's kind of a issue for the folks that are willing to devote time on it. And finally, and this is the big one for me, is I don't see what is so terrible about allowing residential uses of commercial property. I mean, the typical concept of zoning is that a commercial use is a more intense use than a residential use, and with more impact on surrounding properties, et cetera, so that the idea that a lot that could be used to run, just for example, a retail business with lots of traffic in and out of a neighborhood would now be allowed to be used for residential use, which is a less intensive use. My reaction to that is that's really not that objectionable in terms of overall impact of a land use on a surrounding neighborhood, which is one of the concepts of zoning. And in terms of, shoddy stuff and ugly things and broken down things and dilapidated things, some of that can be dealt with in the details when you work out the details and what the requirements are going to be here. But the sort of unfortunate reality is that's the type of housing that is going to be attainable or affordable for people that are working in entry-level positions in the tourism and service business in Girdwood. And that's, so I don't know a way to solve that. I think that's just a reality. And that's my comment. Thanks.
That's a question.
Thank you, Brooks.
I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, this is just a question for Brooks. You're still on, right? I have a question. First of all, I agree with you 100% about so many of the great aspects of this. But I just had a question because when you were talking about the value of passing things in principle, what I then heard you say is that your understanding would be that it then goes to the Girdwood Housing and Economic Committee, but in this, what is actually being proposed for the process is that this then goes to the assembly and possibly assembly work session for working out. So that's actually right at the crux of some of what I'm having trouble with on this, because I'd like to see us vet it out more locally. Did you have a different understanding than what's on the screen?
No. I assume that the Board of Supervisors would want to have, a community process when details are developed, because that's, like I said, the devil is in the details. I mean, it absolutely is. And so you want to have public input on that as well. Thanks.
I clarified this earlier. We'll bring it back to GBOS.
What about GHEC?
Well, I mean, that's fine going through GHCC as well. They're advisory to us, so it makes perfect sense.
Okay, Guy and then Amanda.
No, I had asked that question earlier. That's what I assumed, Brooks, too, that it would, before the assembly brought this to a vote or anything, this would all come back through the committees for final approval. And that's correct, right, Mike?
Come to GBOS and anywhere else we want to send it, including the possibly land use, GHEC, etc.
Okay, I see your hand, Matt, but Amanda, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for all of your comments. I would like to, if I can, call the question. I don't know how long we've been on this, but I think it's getting close to time.
Thank you. Do we need a second for calling the question? I don't think so. So let's call the question. A yes vote is.
I will second just in case.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. If you vote yes, that means you're calling the question. Kyle, could you do that, please?
Sure. Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
No.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy,
Yes.
Mike Edgington.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Okay, and now we're ready to vote. So I ask for a roll call vote. Kyle, on the motion.
Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
No.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy,
Yes.
Mike Edgington.
Yes.
That motion passes 4-1.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for your comments and for coming and all the other meetings with comments about this. So we'll hear about it some more as well. Number 9, Holton Hills proposal. Doesn't have a name by it, so who would like to start us off?
I'll start briefly. We have an item in the packet which reviews the brief history. I think it was Holton Hills notes.
Yep.
Number 9. Yep, item 9. So this is just a summary of where we are. Brief history of the key steps in the Holton Hills project. I'm not going to go through all of these. You'll thank me. There was quite a lot of stuff that was going on in the RFP development agreement. Then we have the second section is various things that we did in Girdwood, and there's a link to all of the documents here. I note that in some cases we asked for information, we received it. If we go down further, I think we received it a year or so later. And then the assembly ordinances. And we went through in some detail and looked at the multiple versions of assembly ordinances that came out last year and into February. And that's a fairly detailed table over the next several pages. And it compares the things that were asked for either by GBOS or HHHC and related topics, and looks at how they were addressed by the different ordinances. So I'm not going to go through this in detail. There's so much information, but people are welcome to look at it. So if you just scroll down through here. So this is multiple pages of all the different things we asked for and what the different proposals did. Right. The thing that's in front of the assembly now is basically identical to the S2 version that was presented in February. The only difference is the change in dates. It talks about the 2024 HLB plan. If we go back to that last page on Holton Hills notes, the one above. So yeah, point 1 is it's basically the same as it's the same. So the assembly, what's in front of the assembly is basically what we have now. The other things that have happened is since February is the assembly passed a resolution to get HLB to look at parcels which could be suitable for a Girdwood nonprofit to develop low cost housing. That happened since the Holton Hills proposal. They also passed a resolution which we were discussing earlier about hiring a consultant to work with the Heritage Land Bank and basically act as a project manager for this. There was an RFP which had no responses. They've simplified the RFP, and as of today, we heard earlier today, the RFP hadn't been issued, but they're expecting it to be later this month. The other thing is the Assembly passed a housing action plan, and I pulled out the 5 main goals of the housing action plan, and this is my opinion, but and I think Brianna's opinion as well, because we both reviewed it. Those 5 goals, I would say this project definitely meets 1, maybe 2, and definitely does not meet 2. So increasing the supply of housing units for sale and rent, well, maybe it does, but there's nothing actually in the development agreement or ordinance which guarantees any housing is provided. The assembly, rather the municipality and the developer basically wash their hands of it once a lot is sold. it does not diversify the housing market as currently proposed. It will almost certainly just be very large, very high-end homes. It absolutely does nothing to increase the share of resident occupied housing. We know from recent experience, both in condos and general housing, that housing which has been built here in the last 2 years, I actually looked at the data for 2022 and 2023, there were 38 houses built in Girdwood in those 2 years. 18 condos, 18 single family homes, 7 of which had ADUs, and 2 others, 1 duplex and 1 small cabin. And out of those 38, 7 have people living in them, and 31 are empty. If you just look at the condos, out of those 18, 17 are empty, and only 1 is occupied. So we know that currently the housing that's getting built here is not increasing the amount of occupied housing. It's actually decreasing our percentage of occupied housing. And this proposal does nothing differently to what's happening today. So we know goal 3 is not met. Goal 4 is reduced housing cost burdens, etc. I would say it's unlikely to meet that, but we don't actually know because that's about details which will be in the planned unit development or the conditional use permit for planned unit development, and we won't see that for months. And then goal 5 is make the municipality a better partner in the development process. Well, I think if the development process means for the developer, then goal 5 absolutely will be met using the current proposal. If we move on to item 4, let's go down a bit. And this is the last point. So this just says that the AO which was introduced, which is currently in front of the Assembly, is basically identical to the AO S2 that was voted on in March and voted to be indefinitely postponed. So that's kind of background. That's where we are. And as we know, there will be a public hearing on AO 2023-137 tomorrow at the Assembly. And I think Zach gave some great analysis of what he thinks will happen tomorrow.
Thank you, Mike, for all of your work on that and the AR 433 housing plan comparison goals, and then these goals. And anyone's welcome to look at the goals chart and decide if we want to state any of those items or where, if this body wants to submit anything before tomorrow. And I did not write a resolution to propose.
I've been thinking about, sorry.
Go ahead.
I put myself in the queue. I've been thinking about this, and basically because the proposal is identical to the proposal which was there last year, which we said we did not support. I mean, we could write something that acknowledges there's been some changes elsewhere. The proposal itself is the same. So to some extent, it almost just still stands. And maybe there isn't any direct action we need to perform.
Jennifer?
I'm sorry, Mike, I didn't hear that last part. You said to some extent, what?
There's nothing, perhaps we don't need to do anything because we've already said no to the AO that is in front of the Assembly now. I mean, it had a different title, but it's the same content.
Let me ask a question.
So maybe we could, I mean, maybe we could just pass a motion and say, we think it's the same. We stick with what we had before rather than write a new resolution.
Thoughts, Jennifer?
Yeah, so Mike, I have some questions about that, like kind of, what am I trying to say? Like strategy questions about that. I have a lot of strategy questions about it. I think it's pretty hard to figure out exactly how to do it, but I could still see benefit in having, in fact, I see a lot of benefit in having a GBOS member somehow or another speak tomorrow. And I know that we don't have time to write out something new, but I have 2 thoughts on that. One is, as you say, there's not much that has changed from before. I don't think that we would necessarily need to reread the same thing, but I think we could trust one of our members to kind of repackage that. But a thing that I would really like to see is, and including some of the statistic work that GHEC has done, and kind of bringing home kind of exactly some of what you just said, things like the new construction actually decreasing our occupancy rates. I would like to see we now have the facts and the numbers to back up what we were saying anecdotally before. So we had all kinds of people coming up and saying, you know, I can't find housing and Well, now we've got the numbers that show it, that show
our need for anchorages, that show what is happening with construction, that show the fact that just because you build houses doesn't mean you create housing. So, you know, I would like to float the idea out there of having a representative speak at the meeting, assuming that they do not postpone it.
Just to jump in, Jennifer, the example you just said that we've heard about tonight too is one thing that has changed because time has elapsed since last year, but the AO is pretty much the same, but they could have floor amendments, like Zach said. But we have that evidence that is real right now. So that's something that has changed, and that I think we all could agree on because it's real. But the other things that came up recently are front page news that says things that are incorrect, like that the AO is mandating things and it's not. So if we agreed on a couple things, we could have that person say them. That if we'd like to have an ask, I would be very comfortable with asking that 50% of the homes or dwellings and the units be occupied by residents. And that's what the editorials claimed, but it wasn't a mandate. It's not binding. So if there's just one thing we could say, because I feel like that's better than not asking for 3. I don't know if that helps with the pose that you just asked with who could speak tomorrow or Wednesday or another day if it's postponed another 2 weeks. Mike's hand is up, but
yeah,
think about that.
I was going
Go
to say
ahead.
the 50% thing. I think we actually had an ask from HHHC, which we agreed with for something extremely similar. So that's consistent with what we've been saying for well over a year, for nearly 2 years.
Right.
So it is ironic that the editorial in ADN, there was also an article in ADN which I think was fairly accurate, but in the editorial in ADN they said, you know, Girdwood should be happy about this because it mandates this occupied housing. I think we would be happier with it if it mandated occupied housing. So perhaps we can use that mistake to our advantage.
Right, Guy?
I have a question, strategy maybe, but I think a person can only comment once on these. Yes. Unless there's substantial change. And so, yeah, I wonder what constitutes substantial change. You know, I wouldn't recommend anybody not commenting if they don't, you know, I wouldn't push that, but I'm saying that, you know, do we need to consider that? If we go speak, if we all go speak, then they make all these changes, then we don't have a voice anymore. So I don't know where the line is drawn on when they allow for public comment again, how much change needs to be in one of these ordinances to allow for the public to comment. I don't know where that.
Well, so a couple things. One is an official comment from GBOS holds a couple advantages. One is that you have a longer time. And then the other is that it gives the assembly somebody to ask questions to. And I think that's kind of important when we have so many new assembly members. So we've got 5 new assembly members, and they were not, they weren't a part of this whole thing the first time around. And the learning curve, as we discovered on this, I mean, even for our own community, was steep. And then I know a lot of us felt like when the assembly voted on it, there were differing levels of understanding up on the dais. So now we're up against that even more so than ever. And so I think having somebody who can answer questions would have some value. You do raise an interesting point, like if they end up taking testimony and then delayed it or not talking about it or bringing it up again on it, and then next thing you know, I mean, the funny thing about this is there are like floor amendments and S versions, and I mean, this thing is, it's like trying to catch a snake.
Yeah.
I think as official members, I think of GBOS, like if this, I don't know, say they allow some testimony and then they delay the vote till later. I think if there is any kind of compelling reason, I think if anybody had an argument for being able to speak again, it would be GBOS.
And I'm not opposed to somebody speaking. It's just a thought I had of, you know, whoever that is, do I go do, I don't, but I would think I think you're right, as G-Boss, likely we would give another opportunity to speak, maybe before the general public, unless there were considerable changes, I don't know.
Mike?
Yeah, I was just want to agree with everyone's description of the frustration of this process. It's not unusual for floor amendments not to really be available until after public hearing is finished, or maybe during public hearing. And if you're not physically in the chamber, they're not accessible at all typically. I wondered actually if Zach could perhaps address or Randy, if he's still on. I can't see the whole list. If an assembly member could perhaps address the issue about if there were changes to this, whether there'd be another opportunity to speak on it or not. I think it's a call of the chair, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I was actually just about to raise my hand to speak to that. So it is somewhat subjective whether or not, the changes constitute substantive changes. I would just point out that would only be applicable if we saw something like an S3 version. Amendments do not necessarily constitute substantive changes. So just speaking somewhat hypothetically here, if GBOS, used their opportunity to testify on this tomorrow night, and then action was postponed, and then, after some work sessions, et cetera, we came back, a month, 2 months later, whatever it is, and took it up again on the agenda. If it was simply the same version, but we were presenting amendments, then no, I don't believe you'd be afforded the opportunity to speak to it again. However, if it was a new version and S3, then you would, but it's hard to say which way that would go. One thing I'll throw out as an option, though, is if, the GBOS decides to take advantage of the opportunity to speak to it tomorrow, and then there are, amendments and things like that come out of future work sessions potentially, GBOS could always, pass a resolution that we could attach in writing as an AIM to go along with it. It might not be another opportunity to testify at a meeting, but I think there would be a way for you guys to weigh in on proposed amendments. So that's just one option that'd be available.
Thank you, Zach. Jennifer has her hand up.
May I ask a follow-up question about that, Zach? If it was going to be postponed, that decision would be made right up front, right? You wouldn't normally take public testimony and then postpone it, or am I wrong about that?
No, we would take the public testimony first. We have to take the public testimony before there's a motion on the item. Sometimes, I believe members have asked for a point of privilege to state their intent. I think usually that comes from a sponsor. So, that's a possibility. But the more typical process is we take the public testimony, close the public testimony, and then the chair asks, what is the will of the body?
I mean, actually, this is probably an example of a case where point of privilege was used to say the previous meeting that although public testimony was going to be opened on the first meeting in January, it would be continued until the second meeting. So if people spoke then, they wouldn't get an opportunity to speak tomorrow. I think that's exactly an example of what Zach said.
Yeah.
Okay, so this does come down to a strategy question of what the board thinks is best, whether it's to speak up now or think that this might be postponed and waited till later. Is that a good summation?
Anyone could respond on the board to Jennifer's. Not rhetorical.
Sorry, well, actually, let me put it this way. Maybe what I could do is, Zach, would you have any advice about this?
My advice would be to be prepared to speak on it for tomorrow evening. If we're talking about what seems the safest course of action walking out of here tonight, I would suggest being prepared. Now, if there's some indication that the sponsor's intent, if I get some sort of hint that there's an intent to postpone or something like that coming from the sponsor, then I could try and, or you guys could even consider reaching out to the sponsor yourselves to try and find out. But there may be an opportunity between now and the meeting time to learn more about what the process is going to look like. But again, I would just say the safest course of action would be to be prepared to testify on it tomorrow night, because there's no guarantees that action will be delayed.
So I think in light of that, we should have somebody lined up to speak, and I think we should make a decision about it.
Okay, and I noticed, because Mike looks like he's ready, or was unmuted and ready to suggest or say something, that not just because it's late in our meeting, but I think instead of deciding to write something, that having one person ready to go is the best option for tomorrow, in case, or if it turns into Wednesday, that person is ready. So I'm fine with that. Mike, did you have something you were gonna say next?
Yeah, only that the data I mentioned earlier is analysis I've done myself. I don't know if Matt has done that in parallel, but I definitely haven't seen it presented before. I've presented the details about the condos at multiple meetings, multiple opportunities, but I was asked, what about other housing? So I did that additional analysis as well. And I can obviously share details with anyone who's interested. But that was going to be, I did sign up for testimony tomorrow, so that was going to be at least part of my testimony.
Okay.
And I'm happy to, although I will have to be on the phone, I'm happy to be the GBO spokesman if somebody would like me to be.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And may I ask the board, has anyone signed up already to testify on the phone? Okay, on that item. So only Mike has signed up to testify on the phone. And does anyone really have a strong desire to be there in person and testify in person?
I kind of do.
Okay, and you'd rather in the capacity of GBOS versus?
If the board is amenable.
Okay. I'm happy for anyone to be there from the board in person to testify. So obviously Mike has just said he's already calling in, so they will call him on that item. But if Jennifer would like to be the person in person, I don't hear any objections, so.
I'd like having a person in person.
Yeah.
Having me done.
Well, thank you for volunteering. We're happy to have you. Okay, she's jumping over here, jumping. Okay, so if anyone else have any comments, we could.
I wasn't clear. I couldn't follow the conversation that was happening there in the room.
I'm sorry.
Could you clarify what happened? Was there a decision made?
There is no objections that Jennifer is offered to go in person and would be happy to be representing GBOS. And then you're already getting called on the item, so you can speak on your behalf. And she'll be prepared in the room Tuesday and potentially Wednesday.
Right, and I believe that Mike, you and I could coordinate on messaging. So like if you wanted to.
You don't have to say the same thing.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right. So yeah, we could coordinate on messaging, particularly if you have a package data, that'd be fantastic. To present your data analysis would be fantastic.
So if you two coordinate your what you're saying, that's great. I think.
So just to check, I just want to understand exactly what happened. So you did ask if there were any objections to Jennifer taking it rather than my suggestion I would, because I didn't hear that question. I would have objected.
You're right. I didn't ask.
Because we both offered, and it didn't seem like there was a decision in the room rather than more broadly.
You're very correct. I did not ask, are there any objections? Because we were right here at the table, just looking at each other, not looking at everyone.
I'll object just so we can put the vote on the record, please.
Okay. Then we don't have a motion. We have an objection to the statement. So we'll need a vote. And that would be that if, I guess we need a motion.
You need a motion. So a motion would be to nominate Jennifer to be the person that speaks in person.
Okay. Someone needs to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. And then
Second.
I'll second.
I will.
Any objections to the second?
Sorry.
Mike, I guess can you object to your motion?
No, I didn't catch so I made a motion in order that we vote on it.
Right.
Yes, you did. but then I thought I was being helped along here that there was no motion yet to have the speaker.
You do have a motion.
I think the motion, which was sort of not fully stated, is probably something along the lines of GBOS moves to nominate Jennifer Wingard to attend in person and speak on behalf of GBOS.
Thank you, Margaret. That's the motion.
And it was second by Guy.
Yes.
Second
Okay.
guy.
So now you're ready to vote.
Now you're ready.
We know that we have an objection because that's how we got here. So
Yes.
probably going through the roll call.
Do we need comment?
Well, any discussion?
Discussion. I would just say that, I think they're both qualified, that they've been following this, and I just feel like if there are questions going to be asked, it might be easier for the assembly people to ask those questions to somebody standing in front of them.
Yeah, well, can I just respond to that, please?
Yes.
Yeah, that's I agree. It's easier if someone is in the room. I'm unable due to sickness to be there, but there are also often members of the administration and other people who are available on the phones who can respond to additional questions. I suspect that will be more relevant when it comes to the actual discussion on the item, which may not happen at all if it's postponed, but rather than during the public testimony itself. So it may not be at tomorrow's meeting. But there are definitely mechanisms that do not require you to be in the room. So I don't think that by itself is enough of a justification.
Thank you. Amanda, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Do we only have to have one representative for GBOS because the Open Meetings Act allows 2 members?
I think to speak on behalf of GBO, on behalf of a body, it needs to be just one person. Because you get the extra 2 minutes. The idea is you get the 5 minutes.
Does that make sense, Amanda? So we only are allowed
Yes,
one organization to have a spokesperson, but anyone else they could both speak, but only one can say they represent GBOS when they make their comments. I will just add to the discussion that I don't want to be choosing between both of you. And I feel like because Mike is unable to be in person, presuming like the highway's fine and everything, that people can get there, that I don't want to have to choose. So I think you'll both do fine, but I also feel like Mike might have more of the answers, but they have other people right there that they can call that are HLB or something that the assembly actually wants to know. I don't know if they want to know all of our data, but, and they might not even get to this item. So I don't want to dwell on this too long. But I appreciate both of your offers to represent us.
This is painful conversation. Why don't we just vote and move on?
Yeah, so I don't hear anything. I'll call for a roll call, and this is for the motion that Jennifer speaks tomorrow or Wednesday.
Okay.
As a representative of GBOS.
Brianna Sullivan,
Abstain.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Guy Wade,
Yes.
Amanda Sassy,
No.
Mike Edgington.
No.
We end up with a tie.
We have to do it again.
Just a point of order. I don't think an abstention is an option under our rules. We have to vote unless we're recused.
Okay,
I suppose we could recuse both Jennifer and I suppose, because we have an interest in the outcome.
That's true.
I think you're the tiebreaker, Brianna.
Right, so I have to redo my vote and then everyone will just be happy. I vote no.
Vote no. Motion passes, fails 3-2.
Okay, do we have to talk about Holden Hills longer?
Well, you still don't have somebody appointed.
I move to have Mike speak for GBOS at the meeting.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second again.
Okay, further discussion? There might be more chances, is my comment, for representing us in different meetings. Okay, a roll call vote. Kyle, please.
Brianna Sullivan,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Guy Wade.
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Oh, I'm tempted to say no. I'm going to say yes.
Amanda Sassy.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thanks for keeping me sort of figuring that out. Okay, anything after this item, slide number 11? We're jumping up number 11 to old business for the HLB 1 and 5 year plans. Because this is due February 9th. I submitted a couple edits that we actually already wrote in 2020.
Brianna, just backing up, did we withdraw 10? I might have missed that.
We bumped up something, so I said the order, I changed.
Sorry.
Number. So we're talking about HLB under old business right now, and then we'll go to number 10. Thank you for that. So for example, one of my edits was the cemetery comment that was in this year's work program is 2 years old. And so I edited that, and that's something we actually already agreed on and sent 2023. And if anyone would like to maybe peruse the HLB 1 and 5 year plan some more and make a motion for a special meeting to look over edits longer, that's up to the body. But go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, one thing, for the general public here, we did get asked by HLB to make an official statement about whether or not we support the Tesla station. And this board did not reach a decision about it before because there were outstanding questions. There were a lot of outstanding questions for it. Kind of felt like it was, it wasn't in it. And I still feel like that a little bit, but we could consider bringing that up during a work session. So, and I don't know if we can maybe get some more answers from Tesla in the meantime. I don't know. I don't know. I'll put it out to the body. I don't know if we're ready to give a decision about Tesla right now. And I know that this is on new business, but I also know we've already talked about the Tesla thing. So anyway, I see two options. That's a long way of saying I see two options, right? We could either try to put it into three. We could say, forget it, we can't give you what you want. Or we can put it into a work session, or we can try to say make a decision tonight.
Okay, and it's the EV charging station that we heard at least 2 presentations on months ago. And that's what HLB brought up today, that they hadn't heard from us and would like us to say something about it before they approve their work program. So Mike, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest to cut to the chase. I'm going to suggest that we have a special a special meeting before February the 9th, early enough that we can compile our comments, vote on it, and get it into the work plan, or get it as a comment to the work plan. That is assuming that staff think that is feasible. Do you think it's feasible, staff, that we could have a work session set up by the 9th, before the 9th?
Yes, just looking at the calendar, we have space next week on Monday, the 29th, and probably on the 30th, definitely day space and maybe some evening space on the 30th. So we'll send out a pool and get it figured out. Does anybody have any major conflicts on the 29th or 30th? If we shot for a midday meeting on that, or evening meeting on the 29th or 30th?
Monday or Tuesday, right?
Monday or Tuesday next week, yeah.
I don't think
I
so.
actually have multiple conflicts on the 29th, but the 30th is open. Not the evening of the 29th, but during the day.
Okay.
And I have an evening conflict on the 30th.
So maybe if we did a mid-afternoon meeting, would that work for people?
Yeah.
Like 3
on
o'clock?
The 30th.
On the 30th?
Yeah. Works for me.
Okay.
And we had and this is for a special meeting, so that's how we can vote on anything, and we could hopefully do homework before it, so we come and get business done, so staff doesn't have to be there.
Yeah, we'll promise not to add anything else to your agenda, so we can hopefully keep it to an hour and you guys can get out.
Kyle and Margaret, wonderful staff.
Promises.
Crystal got her hand up.
And Crystal's hand is up, but we didn't have a second for that, but we're going through the motions because we're all in the room agreeing and nodding our heads, so.
I'll second.
Second, any other discussion? Crystal, go ahead. There you go.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to just talk about the parcel discussion and resolution that got passed at GHAC, and making sure that that gets incorporated into the conversation at the special meeting. I guess a request on that. And I did have one more thing to say about Holton Hills, but we moved straight from deciding who was going to speak to the next agenda item. So I don't know if I would be allowed to go back on that or not. But I'm
Because I rushed that, Crystal, I'll like make an exception if you want to quickly jump there.
So, you know, I have concern that that the Holton Hills might get pushed through regardless of the lack of support from the local community. One of the things that I would like to see amended in the AO is the reference to the housing trust that would need to be created. I think that it kind of discounts, you know, efforts that are, you know, were done, you know, with the intent of solving this problem. So in the Crow Creek neighborhood plan, it referenced creating a housing authority or a management body. I knew that a housing authority was going to be a very heavy lift, if not impossible, which is why I went the management body route, and which is why Girdwood Housing Community or Girdwood Community Land Trust was created. So I feel like the language that's in the AO makes us ineligible because one, we're not a housing specific trust, and one, we're already created, where it talks about something that's yet to be created. So that is something that I realize maybe warrants a deeper conversation, but maybe if members of the GBOS are inspired to write the assembly or let them know that that would be something in particular we would be interested in amending. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate your reminding us that you wanted to add that. And thank you for adding the HLB comments. I did incorporate them in my edits, I believe, but now that I have more time, Crystal, I'll make sure I do that part before the meeting. Mike, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was going to agree in general with Crystal. There was an AR generated after Holton Hills, which talked about taking land out of the HLB land bank and providing it to a Girdwood nonprofit or a nonprofit working with a Girdwood, not in partnership with a Girdwood nonprofit. And that language is much better. So that language should be incorporated into the new AO. I agree with that point.
Okay. And yeah, she also made a good point that you can write or email your representatives. So we're back to the motion. Any other discussion on our special meeting? We'll go, yes, Margaret.
I just wanted to let you know that right now Kyle is booking 3 o'clock on Tuesday, the 30th.
Yeah. Okay.
So we will probably forego the poll.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll go by assent on that. That was a motion. And any objections? Seeing and hearing none.
Sorry, wait. Is that 3 o'clock for the 30th? Right, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And not objecting to the time, just that there was a motion and then we had a discussion about having a special meeting.
Right, okay, all right, yeah.
But Jennifer's got the time, so we're good.
All in.
And Margaret, Kyle, thank you. Any other discussion on that item? Then we should plug along to our business number 10, Girdwood Fire Department request for capital expenses in 2024. Steve Weston.
Hello there. Well, after seeing earlier tonight the balance of 406, I'd like to shrink the request down to, like, let's say 21,000. Also, both our aging gas detectors failed in December, so we had to replace them, so they're off the table. And the resolution is an attempt to, instead of coming back to you piecemeal with many things, try and bulk everything up in one streamlined resolution for all of our capital purchases that I can crystal ball for the whole year. So it would be all the hose, any PPE we needed to replace. And then we are a little behind, do it on the mattress replacement on the station. So doing like 3 this year and then 4 next year.
Okay,
We'll streamline all those we'll itemize them out for you for the next meeting since this is new business.
okay. Thank you, Chief Weston, and thank you, Kyle. Any other questions? That's new business, so we'll hear more about it next time. Number 12, vacancy on the GHEC board.
So we're announcing that there is a vacancy on the board, and if anybody is interested in applying for that vacancy, it was previously filled by a representative from Alyeska Resort. So that position, we got notification that that was abandoned last week, and so we have an opening. So if anybody's interested, please send a resume to Margaret or I, and then we'll move it forward to GBOS for your consideration. So hopefully between now and then, you can make quick action of it and get a resume for next meeting and consider approving.
Okay, any questions, comments? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, have you gotten any interest yet?
It's only recently been,
So nothing.
There.
Nothing. No.
yeah, this is the announcement.
This is the announcement. Okay, great.
Now, yeah, you have a hand up.
I think we have a PowerPoint in the audience online.
Uh-huh.
So William Laurie would like to let the people know at Pomeroy that there's an open spot where one of the guys vacated, that if they want to have a representative at the table, that for them to think about.
Thank you. Yes, feel free to reach out.
Yep.
Margaret.
And as a reminder, the person who fills that seat needs to fit the requirements of the GBOS seats as well. You need to be a resident of Girdwood.
Right.
And all that, all those things.
Right, correct. I see a bunch of, so Mike and then Willem.
Yeah, I was going to mention, it ties to the next item, because we're going to review how we set up boards. I think one of the questions should be, do we still want to be very restrictive on the way we were restrictive on PSAC and on GHEC? We were fairly restrictive on HHH AC because there was so much community noise and emotion around the topic, and I think that's why we defaulted to the same model on GHEC. I think there's a fair question of whether we really want to continue that level of restriction into the future. So, for example, I know Willem has his hand up, and Willem's probably the person at the resort who's most involved in issues around housing. For example, we would, if it was like LUC and other things, we would extend it not just to residents and US citizens who can vote, but also to nominated representatives of businesses and non-profits, etc. So we should consider that when we discuss item 13 for real next time.
Right, thank you for that point, Mike. Willem.
Yeah, Mike kind of just answered my question, but yeah, not being a resident of Girdwood, but as a representative of Alyeska, I was just wondering if I would be able to apply.
Thank you.
I would say apply, and then you guys talk about it at the next meeting, since you're
Right.
handling both.
Yep. Mike's hand back up. Maybe it's not. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying I don't think we can put in anything saying no Canadians, can we? Because we would get so much.
Right. Okay, thank you for bringing up number 12, and that'll bring us to a little bit jumpstart on 13 for new business update of US rules and procedures. Kyle?
Just point of order, it's 9:53.
Yes, it is. I did see that. We could do 13 and 14 if as just intro items really fast, or a 5-minute extension. I'd entertain a motion. Get this done.
Yeah. Motion to continue the meeting till 10, is that what you're saying?
10:10, I don't think we have
Second.
second, or we do. Okay, second. I don't think we have to do anything except ask any objections.
Yes.
Okay, keep on moving. So update of GBOS rules and procedures. This is something we definitely need to look at again, and it will be helpful to finish that off maybe with the 4-acre training. Who would like to talk about this?
I'm happy to start. There's I think we've already discussed some of the things about all the committees we have and whether they need to continue or if they need to continue in what form they continue. There's also a whole bunch of things in the rules and procedures which are not what we actually do. There's a lot of things in there about how public hearings should be held. We kind of have this pattern of discuss everything twice and allow anyone to speak at any time. And I kind of like that at one level, although it does take a lot longer. That's not the way the rules and procedures are actually written. So I think there's a few things like that we can probably do a combination of both. Look and see what works well, look and see what works badly. It's going to be 10 past 10 again tonight, so maybe that's something that doesn't work so well. And then try and actually write the rules and procedures so it matches what we really do, because there's definitely stuff in there that does not.
Jennifer.
Can I make a suggestion on this that we, I don't know, delay this until after we have our board training? Can this wait like another month?
That's a valid suggestion, yes. But I also think meanwhile, we could, if we're not already telling ourselves to do the homework of reading through the rules and procedures and just flagging things that stick out or you want to refine and then go through the training.
Right. And then I think that we still need to keep on the agenda for next time the piece. We might need to make the PSAC decision prior to the board training, right? Because I think that might be.
Because it'll be after their meeting when
So we can keep some aspects of this discussion on the agenda for next time and then delay the other ones for the month after we've had our board training.
Yeah, we'll put it on there and you guys can make a decision if you just want to delay. You can take out pieces if you want.
Right.
The subject will be there.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for the flagging some of the items that you've already seen, Mike, as well. I know we have talked about this for months too, and it's just something we push along while we're all still on the body. Anything else on 13? Any thoughts? Okay, I think I heard them. We all heard.
We've already talked about the cemetery visit.
Yes, but things changed last week even with legal during the work session. So it may have been something we had to decide today, but legal's going to do something else, hopefully. So we don't need a quick action there. Number 14, housing goals. I think this is kind of a similar topic in that it'd be good for GBOS to come up with defined goals when we have. So I'll just let someone else talk about this. Mike, would you like to say anything on this?
Yeah, sure. So we're effectively the decision. We're the body that sort of provides advice directly to the assembly, which is the policy making decision. So I think this is one of these topics, and I'd very much like to work with GHEC on this, is to come up with a overarching set of goals, which we can partly take from Imagine Girdwood and other sources as well, and try and make sure they're consistent with the comprehensive plan as is coming out with the assembly goals for housing as well, and just have at least a set of things we can look at and use to help prioritize, because at the moment there are lots of ideas coming from lots of different places, and some of these are probably things we would all agree are important. Some of these are things that are probably lower on the list, and we have to keep remembering that no one thing is going to be a gold or a silver bullet. There's going to have to be a set of things we do, and I think come out with a succinct and clear description of our goals here will help everybody. And this isn't something that just GBS makes the final decision, but it's not something we should do by ourselves. We should absolutely get as much feedback and input as we can, including from LUC, including from GHEC.
Thank you, Mike. And I agree, looking at just tonight with the Assembly's goals was a helpful rubric compare. So that hopefully is more of a entertaining activity. Brett, your hand is up.
Thank you. Right, I just wanted to add that I did not see it in the packet, but GHEC did pass a resolution that stated exactly that it was workforce housing and rentals for such. That was our main #1 focus. and number one goal. So I think there should probably be some latitude to take the input from that committee and incorporate it into whatever GBOS is considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. And yes, as you make your agenda, I'm sure you could start that. Matt?
And I would just speak to the fact, your co-chair being deeply involved is that, I kind of draw the line and imagine Girdwood and their plans. I only have so many hours a day that I can actually focus. So the ability to make sure that we're syncing up with how they're syncing up I just think is important, right? It goes to Mike's comments, things around there. So.
Yeah. Mike, did you hear that?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was just the synchronization across the different initiatives. We have to make sure they're all consistent, or at least, or if they're not consistent, we understand why they're not consistent, and we can justify it.
And Mike tried to just focus. It's just everybody's got a lot of things on their plate. And if imagine Girdwood can bring their key issues, key items to the table to sync up against, what we're looking at, then yeah, we can all make sure we're on the same page. And I agree.
Thank you. Brett, is your hand up again or down? It's down. Okay. Any other comments on number 14? Quiet. Any reports? Anything else from Kyle or Margaret?
Nope.
Entertain a motion to adjourn at 10 o'clock. No, we have a motion. We are adjourned at 10 o'clock.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.